Okay, I think I'm good. Just go ahead and make sure that I can hear myself and that you guys can hear me when I start talking here. I think I'm. Yes, indeed. You can't hear me. Okay, awesome. Hey, Slendy. Yes, indeed. I do look very emo today, which is totally fine, totally understandable. Currently, I'm waiting on Vick to show up. I sent him via the YouTube private message system the link to join the Hangout. I am not sure if he received it. I'm currently waiting on a response from him to see if he's received it. He told me to go ahead and send it to him through that, so I am. Well, that's not entirely true. He told me to. Oh, there you are, Vick.
Howdy.
I was hoping that you received it. I don't trust the YouTube and messaging system myself, but there you go.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
So is this live? Yep, it's live. Cool.
Yeah, it's currently live. I was testing the sound and all that before you got here. Okay.
Cool. So did you have something in particular that you wanted to discuss, or did you just want to go over the stuff that Pierre and I discussed in that hangout?
Well, mainly I wanted to go over the racial profiling stuff. For those who are currently watching and don't know, basically Vick and Piero have been going at it for like a month now, about a wide variety of different things. One of the main things is profiling, because Vick finds it to be effective when done correctly. And he's in favor of using it to a certain point, to a certain degree, as well as a number of other reasons why I believe he's come to this conclusion that have to do with examining society and cultures as a whole. And I found a lot of what he was saying in the latest hangout with Piero to be just wrong. And so I wanted to just go ahead and do a hangout revolving around that. So I asked him to do it. He's cool with it. So now he's here.
Cool. You know what I think would be most illuminating? I mean, I don't know. You might have already done this, and maybe you just weren't persuaded by it. But it was funny that you sent me that link to that Bruce Schneier blog post, or that article, whatever. He had a very extensive one-on-one debate with Sam Harris on that very issue.
Yep.
And I don't know if did you read it?
Yep.
Because I thought Sam Harris utterly decimated him in that argument.
Well,
I mean, he answered all the points that he raised.
Yeah, a lot of the people who already accept Sam Harris's positions normally believe that he wins every debate he's in, even if other commenters are looking at it and come with a completely different thing. I've actually also seen Harris's debate with Noam Chomsky when it came to what was it, the geopolitics in the Middle East. And I personally feel that Chomsky took that home and made Harris kind of look silly, but a lot of people who are commenting are saying, oh no, Harris totally beat the shit out of Chomsky on that. So I personally am not convinced by those kinds of debates. I know a lot of people think that they're convincing, but quite honestly, just like YouTube, they're more for show than they are with substance.
Well, I thought that it was very substantive. I mean, they pretty much covered all the major points.
Well, no, but here's the problem. Harris himself doesn't have any actual evidence to back up his position. That's the problem. He has what he feels to be reasoning. He comes up with examples. He comes up with thought experiments, and he comes up with a bunch of different ways to reason to the proposition that maybe profiling is good. Or at least the way in which he was advocating for it, which was just anybody who could conceivably be a Muslim, which is so broad as to include anybody. So I don't know what that means.
As he explained, it's not so much about profiling Muslims, which is very difficult, admittedly. It's a lot of it
searching certain people who don't look like they could be terrorists.
Right, anti-profiling.
Right, which doesn't work, as we know. So that's something that we can just disregard.
I don't see how we can disregard that. I mean, Bruce Schneier in that debate even admitted that the likelihood of the next terrorist attack on an airplane or whatever, the likelihood that person is going to be Muslim is high. He said it, high, very likely. So
Yeah, but
why can't we include that as see? I think that what you were saying that it doesn't work. I don't know what statistics you're referring to that say it doesn't work, but but I think what they're testing is a stupid sort of profiling, like just focusing on ethnicity or religious persuasion, whatever. I mean, yeah, if you only focus on that and you ignore everything else, and of course that's not going to be very effective. It's ridiculous.
Well, here's the problem, though. There are plenty of sources out there that point out that even if you don't introduce profiling as a racial-based program, it ends up becoming that anyway. Back in the 80s, actually, was the first time in which profiling was being used in order to catch people in drug cartels across states. And the person who actually came up with it in no way intended for any sort of racial profiling to happen. In fact, according to his words, most of the people they caught were white, so racial profiling wouldn't have even helped in that instance. But when his strategies began being implemented and began being trained across the country, it basically just became racial profiling. Even though that was not the intent of either him or the people who organized the training or anybody involved. Nobody wanted it to be racial based, but that's what it became. So if you introduce any sort of profiling, it ends up becoming racial anyway. That's
any sort of profiling, and even behavioral profiling, because it seems like Bruce Schneier is not even against behavioral profiling. I don't think even Piro is against that.
Because that's not actually what experts call profiling. They call that looking for what was the word that they used? Indicators. They don't actually consider that to be profiling in the traditional.
Well, I'm using Bruce Schneier's term. He actually called it that. He's like, that's behavioral, because when Sam Harris described a certain scenario, he goes, well, that's not ethnic profiling, that's behavioral profiling. And then Sam Harris explained there's almost no distinction there. In a lot of cases, like for example, if you have a person who's looking nervous and fidgety, who's grossly obese and overweight, that's going to be very different than a person who's young, Arab looking, and looking very nervous, and it's just totally different because you can see just based on how they look that the reason that one is acting is sweating and looking a certain way is probably because it doesn't feel very well, right? Whereas the other person, that's not obvious that's the reason. So it's more likely that he is up to no good.
No. So that's not how it works. And I don't have any particular sources on how psychological profiling and behavioral profiling is supposed to work, but I know that that's very oversimplified from how I understand it. If you have any sources that's how it works, you feel free to let me know, but I'm pretty sure that's inaccurate. And
no, I wasn't saying that was an example. I was saying that was Sam Harris's explanation for why.
Yeah, but Sam Harris has no basis to claim any sort of knowledge on that subject.
It's just basic common sense, but you just want to
dismiss
but
I'm kind of against common sense and intuition-based crime fighting because we know it doesn't work and it's really stupid.
We don't know that.
We know it doesn't. One, we know it doesn't work. Two, we know it's bad reasoning. We know it's bad reasoning. Unless you accept William Lane Craig argument.
Let me give you an example. I'll tell you when it's bad. I'll tell you when it's bad and stupid and ineffective. So, for example, I gave the example in one of my comments to Piro. I think you read it actually.
No, I did. I understand.
Imagine if you.
I get it because your example was imagine you're in the inner city and most of your customers are going to look a certain way.
Right.
A thuggish way. Obviously, profiling people who look thuggish, whatever that means,
wouldn't be effective.
Wouldn't be effective because most of your customers are that anyway.
Exactly.
But if you're in a better part of town, a better city, or a better part of a suburb where you don't normally get people who are walking in looking thuggish, again, whatever the hell that means, then maybe it might be a little bit more effective if you started profiling people who looked thuggish in that particular aspect.
If that's how most of them looked. If that's how most of the thieves in that area look and behave.
Yeah, but we don't know that's how most of the thieves in the area look, and we don't know that's how anybody, and we don't know that there's any sort of uniform look as the thieves. I'm pretty sure thieves don't have uniforms.
I think we could probably look at when they go get their mug shots taken. I think we can probably notice patterns.
It tells us nothing about what they were wearing. So that wouldn't help us at all.
What do you mean?
Mugshots.
Sometimes they take them in immediately, right? Don't they usually take them in immediately and take a picture of them immediately?
But a mugshot is a face shot. You know what a mug is, right?
Well, sometimes it includes more than just the face.
Yeah, it includes like here to here.
Whatever. The point is that I would assume that most of these people who get arrested, and believe me, I'm not the one on the streets. I'm not the one.
Well, obviously.
But cops, right? They are the ones arresting people all the time. They're the ones who are in charge of fighting crime, right? So they would know.
They're in charge of fighting crime. They're in charge of trying to do their best to delineate the amount of crime that's going on in their area.
Right.
However, what they do is very ineffective and actually is very destructive when they do profiling, because inevitably it becomes racial profiling. I have a lot of evidence as to that, and if you like it, I can go ahead.
Well, I mean, I've heard from them that a lot of them. I mean, I don't know if it's true, but I mean, I've heard a lot of them claiming that, like, the stop and frisk policy actually worked. No, I know I know they say there was a lot of.
There's statistics showing that doesn't work either, because 80% of the time it doesn't catch anybody, even when they're doing it.
Yeah, but is that really the big problem here, or is it the? I mean,
yes, I'll explain because there's a lot of
false negatives are worse.
A lot of negative effects that profiling causes that you're just not in any way aware of because you don't research this stuff. I have been, so I'm going to go ahead and inform you as to why it's bad.
Go for it.
So first, we know that racial profiling happens, and we know that it happens a hell of a lot. For instance, in Maryland, there was a study that revealed 70% of those stopped and searched on a stretch of I-95, not stop and frisk, just traffic stops, were African American, despite the fact that only 17% of drivers on the road were, in fact, African American. So there's no way that this could just be chance. This is clearly profiling done as a result of their features. And the same thing was found in New Jersey, though not to the most extreme extent of 70%. It was found at a 46% to 15% instead, which is still statistically significant by a huge margin. When studies are used on stopped and arrested and stopped and frisked people, they find that the statistically significant degree of racial profiling is 54.27 standard deviations, which is about 52 standard deviations over the necessary amount to determine that there's something specific going on as far as profiling is concerned. So we know what happens. And we also know that higher ups in police forces know that it happens as well, because there were court cases in the past that used communication from higher ups in police forces to encourage racial profiling. And I'll go ahead and give you a source on that. Actually, this book is extremely informative on a lot of these different topics, though it's not going to be my sole source. I'm going to go ahead and put that.
And I would bet that I could probably find you sources where they show that racial profiling did work to a certain extent.
You'll find no scholarly sources agreeing that racial profiling works. I guarantee you, actually. Because there are none.
You've actually looked for them?
Oh yeah. As far as the peer-reviewed literature goes, and as far as scholarly works goes, nobody can really justify racial profiling as being something that's efficient and effective. Nobody. They've been unable to do it. The understanding is that do all the research.
I'm not saying that all sorts of profiling work in all cases. Obviously.
Well,
right?
Here's the problem, though. We know that
profiling
based off of how people look, it becomes racial profiling. I'll go ahead and send you the source on that as well. So we know that happens. So when you're saying that you want profiling to be done on how people look, but not necessarily how they look racially. Well, guess what? It's going to be a racial thing anyway. So that's what you're advocating for, whether or not you know it, because that's what happened. That is exactly what happened. Somebody advocated for profiling based off.
I mean, that could be part of it. Yeah, that could be part of it. I mean, I think
we know it's going to happen, and we know that it's a destructive thing that wastes resources. Because here's the thing: 70% of the time, when people are searched, and because of a result of racial profiling, guess how much of the time when they're racially profiled, they actually are found to have something wrong with them, something that they're doing that's going to be a crime. Normally, drug related, by the way. It's usually about 28%. And do you know what the rate of white people investigated, not racially profiled, and how often those people end up being found to be doing some sort of crime, normally drug related? It's 28%. So it's the same amount. So we're spending about four times the amount of time investigating a particular amount of people and not arresting any more than what we would do when we're just doing normal police procedures with white people. So clearly this is a waste of time. We know that this is happening. I have sources on to that effect as well. So we know it doesn't work.
It's like when you screen bags at an airport, like 100% of them are going to find nothing, right? Pretty much every day, right? Most days there are no terrorist attacks.
Yeah, that's why we don't actually.
But does that mean that is completely useless?
Security is nonsense, and we know it doesn't work.
It's the false positives are not an issue really. It's the false negatives that I'm most concerned about. You know, people who slip through the cracks just because we're trying to be fair and scrutinize everyone equally.
Well, here's the thing: you want to allocate resources in such a way that is most efficient. But I'm giving you evidence and explaining to you the statistics that show that it's actually inefficient.
In certain isolated cases, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm never disputed that in certain isolated cases it doesn't work.
No, I'm not talking isolated cases. I'm talking whenever.
Whenever?
Yes, whenever racial profiling
we do profiling, and I mean it's inductive reasoning, it's pattern recognition. No, I gave you that example that I gave, that hypothetical that I gave. Hold on.
I understand the hypothetical you gave, and I understand that you're trying to appeal to inductive reasoning.
Okay, so do you agree that at least in that instance, profiling would have made sense?
No, in that instance, you actually have not delineated any sort of thing that I could look for that would actually be helpful in that instance. By the way, for anybody who's watching, because we're referring to a comment section that probably nobody has taken a look at, what Vick gave me was an instance of something that he finds to be foolproof, to be something that any reasonable person would profile in, which was, say you work at a convenience store, and then one day a teenager comes in and they grab a can of beer, shoot off a party popper, and then run out giggling like an idiot. And then like an hour later, another kid enters the store, and they're both, by the way, wearing football uniforms from a local high school. And that kid comes in and they do the exact same thing: grab a beer, shoot off party popper, and leave the store. So imagine this happens for like 3 days straight, right? And then another teenager who's wearing a football jersey from the local high school enters. Would you not profile that person, or at least be more suspicious of that person than, for instance, an old lady in a wheelchair or a guy wearing a suit? And my answer to this,
excellent. Yeah, that was perfect.
Yeah, I do understand what your points and what your positions are. The thing is, I already know you're wrong.
Okay.
And my answer to that is not enough information, because it's not. As you already know, that's not enough information. It doesn't tell us how many students there are in the local high school. It doesn't tell us how many times we see these same amounts of people coming in.
Well, okay, it was implicit. It should have been implicitly understood that there aren't like most people. All right, fine. I'll adjust the hypothetical then. So
because you're already screwing up, because you can't actually construct a hypothetical in this situation, because you're trying to indicate a causative factor that we can look at.
It's just, I mean, it's just, I can't believe that you're going to tell me that there's never been a point in your life when you have just noticed a certain pattern, and it's based on a person's look, and then like when it happened again, when they came again, you're like, holy shit, and you're more apprehensive because of the pattern that you've been noticing. You've just based on outward appearance. There's never been a situation in your life when you've done that, and it's been true, it's been accurate.
There have been instances where I've done that, but I can't think of an instance where it was true and accurate. Because here's the thing: we are pattern-seeking animals, and we are capable of recognizing patterns. But guess what? That also means we're capable of recognizing patterns that aren't actually there. There's a reason why we have a whole bunch of people who keep seeing Jesus in toast. Looking for patterns isn't really all that helpful. What is helpful is listening to the experts and listening to the statistics. Now, your particular statement in that debate with Piro, if you want to call it a debate, it was more of a discussion, I would say. But anyway, your statement when you were left alone, at some point anyway, you said that your position is based off of the notion that statistics matter. Now, right. What I'm telling you is that all the statistics that covers this, all modern day statistics, anything that you can find from 2000 onward up to 2016, all of it is in agreement, doesn't work.
I don't think that it's all of it. And secondly, the method of profiling is important, right? You can't just say,
I have about 5 sources here saying it doesn't work. I want you to give me at least one.
It doesn't. I don't have it with me. I mean, I could go ahead and I could look for it later. But the point is, The point is that you can't just lump all profiling, because I've already acknowledged that there is bad profiling and there's good profiling. There's stupid profiling and there's smart profiling, right? LL is an example.
Explain your metric.
The metric of what? Use them. Why don't you go look at what LL metric is for profiling people? They haven't had.
We're trying to differentiate between good and bad profiling.
They use ethnic profiling.
Between good and bad profiling. I mean,
they use ethnic profiling. They are widely considered to be one of the most secure airport security systems in the world.
Fantastic. Do you have a scholarly source for this?
I can provide you with one, I'm sure. What do you mean scholarly? Why does it be scholarly? Why can't you just go by them? They are saying they statistically
I should totally take their word for it that they're awesome and they're.
Why do you think they're considered? So why do you think they're so? Why do you think there hasn't been a single terrorist attack? I mean,
you know, nobody rides them. There's a possibility. Have they?
Do you know how many people would love to? How many people in that part of the world would absolutely love to fly a plane into an Israeli building?
And can't.
Huh?
And maybe they can't.
Right. And why can't they? They've tried. They've just foiled. Like.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Give me a source as to how many actual Terror Plus
that they've actually foiled. Okay.
Actually,
I'll try to find it for you.
Racial profiling. Yes.
Try to find it for you.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
And let me get and I'm gonna assume here that if I find you that, you're just gonna see that as an isolated incident and you'll just dismiss it.
No, if racial profiling works, then racial profiling works. My stance here right now is that according to all the evidence that I have seen and been shown and been explained about, is that racial profiling and ethnic profiling and profiling in general, in that sense, just doesn't work once you start adding the real world into the equation of what you're talking about. If it does work, if it does, as a matter of fact, work, then that's fine. Now I simply have an ethical reason for why we shouldn't use it.
Okay.
So it would simply be a simple question of, if it does work, we would reach the point of, okay, we've developed the atom bomb, we know it works, should we use it? That's basically where we would be, but we're not to that point yet. There is not sufficient evidence to establish that it works. There's a lot of evidence to substantiate.
Well, I mean, that's your claim, but okay, I will go ahead and make the effort to try to find those statistics.
Explaining to you that it doesn't work.
I will try to find those stats for you, and then hopefully that will move this conversation along. But let's just assume, for the sake of argument, right? Let's just imagine hypothetically that there is evidence that it works in some cases when it's done properly, right? So let's move on to the ethical aspect of this, where you think it's not ethically justified. Sure. So you seem to be, based on that, you seem to be telling me that you're more concerned about protecting the feelings of people. Okay, then why are you ethically? What is?
I'm not more concerned about that. I have two concerns here. One, does it work? Answer, no. Two, is it ethical? Answer, no. I'm equally concerned about both of these things. But for the sake of argument, if we're going to go ahead and say that profiling, as a matter of fact, works, then we also have the ethical consideration. What exactly is our goal when it comes to profiling? It's to reduce crime, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what causes crime?
Well, I mean, I think I think that the biggest driving force behind...
Either I or you actually know what, as a matter of fact, causes crime.
I think, ultimately, as I've explained multiple times in that hangout that you were listening to with Piero, I explained multiple times that at the end of the day, what was that?
Socioeconomic factors, right?
No, that's Piero's argument.
Okay. What's your...
I'm saying that culture, ultimately, at the end of the day, anytime we do anything, it boils down to our values, right? Values and priorities. And those values and priorities come from our parents, from our culture, from our community. That's where it comes from our peers and stuff. And I'm saying that is what drives it ultimately, because we have a lot of poor neighborhoods, right, where crime isn't that high, right? So what is it about that poor neighborhood that is different from, say, a poor ghetto neighborhood?
A lot.
Yeah, and I would say it's the culture.
Like
the culture
for you to measure.
Yeah, and I would say it's the culture that's
okay. So that's not an answer. Culture is basically you just saying something involving their life causes crime.
yeah, ideas, values, attitudes,
So
norms.
anything that happens in their life may be a cause of crime. Culture's not an answer.
Not anything that happens. It's certain ideologies that they have, certain attitudes that they have.
Which differs all throughout any one culture. Because
Of
you do
course, it
understand that cultures
differs.
feed into each other, right? There is no such thing as a culture that exists in a vacuum all alone, right? You know that, right?
Right. But you acknowledge
So,
that there's a difference between, let's say, American culture and Japanese culture, right? There's a huge difference.
sure, but the question that I would have to leave up to the experts here is what are the delineations?
Okay, see, that's the thing. Culture is a fuzzy concept. It's not this thing that you
Yeah,
can
so
like
you can't use
easily
it as an answer.
quantify.
You can't use it as an answer. If you can't quantify it, which by the way, it
That's
is
not true.
quantifiable, it's just something that experts are able to do that I can't at the current moment, and neither can you. It's something that you and I have not been able to quantify on our own. We'd have to look to people who actually have. But if you can't quantify it, if you don't have a clear delineation in your mind as to what, as a matter of fact, in culture causes crime, then you can't use it as an answer.
Yes, I can, because it's observable, right? So, for example,
God causes things to happen.
all right, calm down, calm down. So it's like I mentioned this example to Piero in the Hangout. It's like take baldness, right? That's a fuzzy concept. Can I tell you the exact delineation between a person who's bald and not bald? No, it's a fuzzy concept, right? Does a person have to be missing 50% of hair, 70% of hair, 80% of hair? I don't know, right? But we know that bald people exist, right? When you're missing a certain amount of hair, it's pretty clear that that person is bald. It's pretty unambiguous. But then, when they're kind of balding, it becomes somewhat ambiguous whether they're. So culture is similar, right? You can't easily quantify the values and attitudes of a particular community or society, but you can observe it. It's just something that we just recognize. It's hard to describe, but it's there. We notice it, and we don't have to wait for studies to be conducted for us to be mobilized into action.
Well, I
I
suppose we
mean,
would have to wait until evidence comes forward as to what things are before we start using those explanations, but it would definitely be the smart thing to do.
no, because people are being affected in the meantime, right?
Yeah, so let's
People
just
are dying, people are being killed, raped, etc.
so let's just act rationally and hope that whatever we're doing helps, and regardless of whether or not we know it's helping. Yeah, sure. That sounds
Usually the stuff with culture, it's just, I mean, I would say that quantifying it is more helpful in determining our progress in eliminating a certain decadent culture, right? But the fact that it's there is, I don't need a study to tell me that it's there. It's observable. You can see it. It's
you
everywhere.
need to study if you're going to actually address any sort of problems in any sort of effective way.
No, not to identify the problem.
Yeah,
Like you can just see it.
No, you don't.
It's like if I see that I don't know, my car
Okay,
is
go ahead and tell
behaving
me
a certain way, right? Do
about,
I need a study to determine that my car is acting in a way that's unusual? No, I can observe it.
should probably get it seen by some sort of expert to figure out what exactly is wrong with
Yeah,
it.
to fix it, not to tell me whether it's broken. I know that it's
No,
broken.
you don't know it's broken. It's just something you don't know anything yet.
I don't know that it's broken.
If it doesn't
Really?
start, then you can say that it's not starting.
If it's behaving in a way that's.
But here's the thing. All you're doing right now is you've got to the point that crime exists. That's all you've gotten. What you're trying to do is you're trying to say in this analogy that you can identify culture as the problem, but you haven't identified the problem in your car until you've taken it to an actual expert to get it looked at.
What do you think is driving crime?
I don't know.
You don't know.
Well, I have some ideas.
Okay, what are your ideas?
I have some ideas as to what's going on, and a lot of them are very allegorical with Piero's, such as, sorry, not allegorical, parallel, bleh, words, which would indicate, being estranged from your community, as a result of perhaps being in a single-parent household, being estranged from your friends as a result of whatever sort of personality that you have driving away any sort of social interaction. You try to find it in some sort of acceptance socially. There's a lot of different things that might cause it. But here's the thing. If any of those things are right, then your proposition of profiling as a way to delineate crime stifles the decrease of crime.
Hold on. So let's say you're right, and this
well, if I'm right, the profiling
hold on, I'm not talking about profiling right now, but we can go back to that in a second. But let's imagine you're right that
I don't want to imagine. I don't want to imagine that I don't want to go over thought experiments that are irrelevant.
I'm going by what you said. I'm imagining what you said is true.
I don't know if they're true.
Okay, well, I'm just saying that's what you think is likely to be true, or that's where you're leaning. I'm just let's analyze that.
That is what.
So let's imagine it is true that being I don't know what word you use, but alienated or whatever from your friends and whatever family, a single parent household, whatever. How do we make it? Well, first of all, wouldn't you say that that's a problem that we should fix, right? I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like that when you have a kid, hold on, when you have a kid, right, out of wedlock, and you know, you're not married, there's no father in the household, you're at work all day, father's nowhere to be found, and that kid's basically being raised on his own, right? You would agree that that is a problem, and that's a choice that the parents made, the mom made, right? She decided to bring that child into the world. So that is a problem.
No.
Right?
No.
That's not a problem?
No. It can cause a problem, but that doesn't mean that it in itself is a problem. There are other things that we can do to sort of mitigate the situation without that.
Okay. Good. Excellent. How do you do that?
Create centers that people can go to that are accepting of a lot of different people, decreasing bigotry in the area so that people don't feel alienated, awareness campaigns to bully schools, a lot of these things. Normally, making people feel more accepted makes them a lot less
likely to
crimes, as far as I understand it.
Good. Okay. So the communities and stuff, you curate centers and stuff. Now, what if those children aren't interested in those centers and they join a gang instead? How do you prevent that? Or how do you at least mitigate that risk?
By being more open to them.
Wouldn't you say that the best way to do that is to instill those values for it?
There's just, oh my God, no, not to instill those values for it. Oh my God.
You don't think parenting plays any role here in what you're...
The problem is there's so many roles that you're just trying to isolate one, and you're going about it entirely incorrectly.
I've never...
That's why I've said, not only do I not know if the things that I mentioned are things that might cause people to go to crime, but it's a few things of a wide variety. Like, if you can't actually discern what the cause is, you can't come up with a solution.
So you're just gonna poo-poo any idea that somebody comes up with because
it might cause more problems, just like profiling.
Yeah, and not doing anything is already a problem, isn't it?
No,
we already have a problem.
We don't do anything. I'm pretty sure we're doing stuff. I'm pretty sure people are being sent to jail.
Yeah, you know what I'm actually fighting against here? It's not so much that you don't, because first of all, I acknowledged it in that hangout with Piro, that I'm not opposed to fixing infrastructure, erecting schools, creating community centers, being more accepting of people. I'm saying that that's a separate issue. So what I'm saying is that culture matters. It matters. But whenever I mention culture, and it was so telling, I think the most telling part of that entire hangout with me and Piro was the part when I did exactly what I just did with you, where I said, okay, just imagine in this situation that these people are poor, okay? And then he's like, okay, well, what else was going to cause them to become chaotic and criminal? And he's like, well, you can, what could prevent them from doing that, from becoming chaotic and criminal? And he's like, and violent. And he's like, well, we can give them more opportunities. I'm like, okay, well then hypothetically, let's imagine for whatever reason, the system currently can't afford those opportunities to them, right? So they're poor and they don't have the same opportunities. And the system at the moment is currently unfair, somewhat unfair. They don't have the same opportunities as other people, right? So how do we prevent them from, in that situation then, how do we prevent them? How do we curb that tendency of them to become violent and criminal? And Piro's response, which was shocking, was to, well, fuck it then, we got to build a wall around them then. And I'm like, and that was so telling to me, because at no point did it enter his psyche that maybe we should start instilling better values and changing the culture so that even when people are poor and people don't have certain opportunities, that they don't react by being criminals, by victimizing innocent people, right? I mean, okay, you seem bored. What is
because
none of this makes any sense? None
no,
of this
it's not that.
rings
Well,
true?
none of it makes any sense for a variety of reasons. I mean, you're talking about instilling values in people without any sort of mechanism as to how that's even supposed to work.
Okay, I'll explain it to you.
Okay, go for
So
it.
how did we do it? How did we, okay, you would agree that in the past 10, 20 years, the culture of homophobia in America has drastically reduced, right?
Sure.
Okay. And also
It's
the
still a substantial
racism,
population, though.
that existed during Jim Crow and the
Actually,
60s
I'll
and
go ahead and
stuff,
say this. I'll go ahead and say this. I don't think the homophobia and racism and all of these other sorts of things have dropped. I think they've just changed.
they've changed.
Yes, they're manifesting differently now.
So it's the same degree of homophobia and racism. It's just manifested differently.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, that is absurd to me. I mean, clearly, I mean, I could just speaking from personal experience. I mean, I can just tell you that I used to have, you know, homophobic tendencies back when I was a teenager, right? And when I look back at that, I feel ashamed, right? It was stupid. It was bigoted. It was dumb. It was retarded. And so I don't have any repressed homophobia right now. None, zero. So, and I would imagine that I'm not an outlier in this. I would imagine that in the vast majority of cases, it's the same. People by word of mouth, people started talking about the issue, they started reflecting on it, and they realized this is stupid what we're doing here. Okay, you're bored again.
I mean, you can't tell me I used to be a homophobe and now I'm not anymore, and I'm pretty sure it's not repressed because there's no way for us to actually verify that.
Oh my God. Then this conversation is like nowhere to go. It's like
Well,
you just claim one thing, I claim it. We can't, there's no common sense observations here. We can't observe it because there has to be some sort of, I'm sure there's probably studies out there that show, but then you're going to say, well, it's those studies can't be trusted because that it's just more
Give me the
repressed now.
study.
It's not
Give
measuring
me the scholarly sources.
that homophobia is less prominent now than it was in the 90s or 80s or 70s.
Or that it's not manifesting in the way in which I'm proposing that it could be, because it's a hypothesis that I'm giving.
I'm sure it's become. I'm sure
Because
the
here's the thing. You're trying to build some sort of conversation off of hypotheses that we're both giving each other that are merely based off of nothing more than our personal observations on life and our personal reasoning skills.
So we can't have conversations about things that we observe in our everyday lives anymore.
I'm not saying
we have to wait for studies to be conducted before we can talk.
I'm not saying that you can't have a conversation over what you personally observe, but when we're talking about something like hugely societal, if we're just talking about whether or not you and I are ethical people by our own standards, then sure, we don't even need any studies as far as that stuff is concerned. But that's when we're talking about a systemic problem, when we're talking about a societal problem, these things are left to people who actually have degrees in studying this stuff. Joe Blow on the street is not the person who you're supposed to be asking about proper domestic political etiquette. That's just not how it works.
I don't need to wait for a study to notice that homophobia is not as rampant today as it was in the 90s. It's pretty obvious that it isn't. Just as racism today is not as rampant as it was in the 60s, right? When there was institutionalized segregation and stuff. I don't need a study to determine this. I can see it.
No, you can't, because you're affected by the same culture you're raised in.
My observation. So what? So what is your? So what you're saying is that wait. So you're saying that it's true in my immediate community, but you're saying that I just can't extrapolate from that.
True in anyone's immediate community.
So I can't even tell in my immediate community that it's not as prevalent as it was in the 90s.
No, it's just not happening in the way in which you normally recognize it. And so, because
well, you seem to be saying that in a pretty matter-of-fact kind of way.
Yes,
so do you have the studies?
Institutionalized racism going on all over America.
So because you're saying it with such conviction, do you have studies that show that this has been transformed into this repressed, subtle way that is shifting?
Have you not been paying attention to the fact that I've been giving sources that demonstrate that 70% of the time, 15% of the population is being racially profiled, and that's
homophobia. Let's stay on topic here.
No, because this is relevant, because racial profiling is a symptom of racism.
We can go back to racial profiling. That's fine. But I'm just saying, right now, let's just finish this discussion. We're talking about homophobia.
You're asking me how racism currently manifests in such a way in which a lot of people just aren't recognizing it.
That's not what I just asked you. I was asking you specifically about homophobia, and you're pretty sure that the homophobia, it seems, I mean, just based on your demeanor and the way you're talking, you seem pretty sure that this homophobia really hasn't been dramatically reduced. It's just been transformed. Now, what is your evidence of that?
Because if it hasn't shifted, then it's moved to a different place. Here's some
into nothingness.
What are you talking about?
It's non-existence.
Yeah, no, not non-existence. I mean, outside of America, as in the people who are currently who were doing stuff that was homophobic explicitly in the way in which you recognize it at an earlier date, have noticed that it's not working, so they have taken it to other places, and it's becoming a lot more prevalent, such as in Africa and Uganda specifically.
So the people here in the 90s who used to be
America
very homophobic, they moved to Africa.
No, they didn't move to Africa. They have resources to influence Africa, you silly Billy.
They what now?
They have resources to influence Africa.
What? Okay, what does that have to do with? So, wait. So, did they move to Africa or not? No, they didn't move to.
No, the same.
I'm talking about the homophobia. Where'd the homophobia go? So you're saying so they got rid of their. Wait, I'm trying to understand you. Hold on.
No, you're really not, because I'm answering your question and you keep interrupting me while I'm answering your question.
Okay, go ahead.
So clearly you're not. So there's a lot of different ways in which homophobia has not gone down, but simply manifested differently or been sent to a different place in order to better be recognized. We can actually find that homophobia, for instance, in Uganda was something that wasn't even a thing like 1 century ago. They didn't even care about that kind of stuff. And as we have noticed, as gay rights have become more realized in the United States, homophobia in outlying places where a lot of the different institutes that have some sort of vested interest in pushing homophobia have done more work in other places in order to push it elsewhere. The homophobia didn't go away, it just went to another country. Or if they're manifesting in a different way, it's people who are trying to say, you can't infringe on my religious right to discriminate against homosexuals because that's a firmly held belief that I have. A Supreme Court decision allowed for genuinely held beliefs, sincerely held beliefs, the word escaped me, as an excuse to basically discriminate against people. Not just women, which was the main case as far as providing health care for them, but it sets a precedent for a whole bunch of other people who have, as a matter of fact, been opening up cases all over the place to try and say that their religious liberty is under attack because they don't get to attack homosexuals anymore. It's still there. They are just aware that they have to go through certain channels before they can start making it accepted again. And so that's what they're trying. And they're differentiating their rhetoric. They're changing their rhetoric. A lot of homophobia that has existed throughout the century still exists. There are still plenty of organizations that are trying to push the notion that a homosexual is equivalent to a pedophile. There are still politicians in the United States who are trying to say that homosexuality is comparable to bestiality. There are, like, the fact that you don't think that homophobia is that much of a problem anymore is just baffling to me, because we know that it is.
Okay, first of all, I didn't, that's why I specifically said reduced. I didn't say that it was eliminated. I didn't say anything, I didn't say that it's not an issue at all anymore, right? Of course, it still exists. And of course, some of what you just said is true, that it has transformed. It's become more repressed, more subtle form of homophobia. It's not as open because it's so taboo these days, right? Same thing with racism. If you say anything that is even remotely hints at you being a racist, you could lose your job, you could lose your friends. I mean, it is so yeah, so people who are still racist, they will tend to suppress that. That is true. But it is also true that some of these homophobic attitudes and some of these racist attitudes have been completely eliminated in certain people, in a lot of people, right? And I think the way children are being raised now, right,
The most you can say is that
is
it's been eliminated in you. That's the
it's
most you
not,
can say.
that's not the most I can say because I can observe it happening
No,
elsewhere.
you can't, because there's ways in which it'll manifest in which you don't recognize it as being homophobia.
Good grief. So then, okay, so then you said that homophobia moved to another country.
No,
Okay,
I
so first of all,
move to another country.
you
I
said in
said
a lot of,
that's
you said,
one of the things that has happened.
okay, one of
That
the things is that it has moved to another country. Okay, so first of all, Africa, the continent of
you're not listening.
Africa, has
You're not,
always been homophobic.
you're not listening to me again, and you're still mischaracterizing what I say. And I don't, and it's really very annoying when you intentionally mischaracterize
I'm
what I'm
not
saying.
intentional.
Because
I'm
I've
really
told you
not.
several times that the homophobia didn't just go elsewhere, that there's other things that have happened. And yet you're trying to say, well, you're saying to me that the homophobia went to Africa. No, that is, as a
Not
matter of fact,
all of it. Not all of it. Some of it.
no, I'm not even saying that some of it did. I'm saying that the homophobia that we experienced as being the most extreme manifestation has merely manifested elsewhere. And the homophobia that still exists is still from that. It's just shifted the way it manifests. You're not understanding what I'm saying, and then you keep mischaracterizing what I'm
No,
saying.
you're right. I don't really understand what you're saying because it's kind of convoluted. But
Well, it's not
what
convoluted.
you're saying,
That's
what the thing is that you're saying it with such conviction. The hypocrisy is just amazing. You don't realize it. You're saying it with such conviction, right? As if you know this to be a fact.
what I do,
How do you know it to be a fact?
because I actually researched this stuff, whereas you could.
Okay, oh, okay. Show me the studies on this homophobia, how it has all,
Well,
most of it or all of it.
entirely off topic to homophobia, where I just wanted to talk about racial profiling.
Because it's all related. What the whole point,
And as soon as I tried to get back to racial profiling, you said, no, no, I don't
let
want
me
to talk about
explain the relevant, let me explain the relevance. The reason that I brought up homophobia is because we have, it has been affected. We have been, because you asked me, I think that's how this, what caused this, little bit of a segue is that you talked about how do you propose that you're going to change the culture to change this sort of thing. And I was merely
No,
pointing out
actually,
that this worked.
you were the one who kept going
Hold
off,
on. This
because I was
worked.
trying to inform to you that if you don't actually have a clear-cut idea as to what exactly is causing crime, then you can't actually propose any sort of fix to crime.
Okay.
That.
Well, then let me tell you why I think the culture is primarily responsible and not
What part of
economic conditions and not racism. So the
what
reason
part
that I, huh?
what part of culture? What is a part of culture that causes
Well, there's certain attitudes that, like, for instance, in the black community, there
racism?
in a certain,
More vague, fuzzy stuff. You have no actual answer.
of course it's fuzzy. When you're talking about values and attitudes within a culture, it's a fuzzy thing. It's not an you can't specifically quantify it, at least not right now. I can't.
Can't prove what you're saying, so but you're going to say it anyway because you can't.
And you can't prove anything that you're saying either. You can't give me
I
exact.
wasn't trying to. You're the one who demanded.
Then we can't have a talk. Then we can't talk about this. Then.
No,
Right?
I'm telling you that if you agree with a particular kind of hypothesis, then that's going to color your goals as to how you're going
All right.
to.
So let me explain to you, without getting interrupted. Let me
But you
explain to
don't
you
have a.
how. Let me let me explain to you why I personally come to the conclusion, or at least why I think that the best evidence right now is that shows that culture is mostly responsible, not poverty, not economics, not racism. Okay, so when we look at the statistics, or let's go back to the
Which
African Americans.
which one?
So So when you look at the statistics about violent crime rate,
what statistic? What are you talking about?
just FBI.gov, just the murder rate.
That's not informative at all.
Why is that not informative?
Because that doesn't tell us anything about any sort of cause or anything at
Okay,
all.
well, I'm trying to explain to you how I come to the conclusion that culture is responsible. Okay,
Basically,
so when you look at the can I finish my whole?
Sure, go for it. Finish.
Thank you. Okay, so when I look at the statistics and I see, as a matter of fact, that Black people represent like just 13% of the population, and yet they commit more murders, right, than all white people combined, right? Not just poor white people, but just all white people combined. They commit the most murders, period, and only represent 13% of the population, right? So we know that it can't be poverty that accounts for it, because there are more, I mean, the poor Black people commit more murders than not just all poor white people. They commit more murders than all white people put together. So clearly, poverty doesn't account for this disparity here.
That's not
right?
what I tell you at all. So go ahead with your next idea.
Huh? I mean,
you can't derive that fact from the statistics. So what's next?
What do you mean I can't? Of course I can, because if it was poverty, then you would expect it to happen equally, right?
No, you wouldn't.
Proportionally.
No, you wouldn't.
Per capita murder rate would be the same.
Here's the problem. You're eliminating poverty as a possible explanation because it's not uniform across the different racial lines as far as poverty is concerned. But you can't do that because we understand that that's not how reality works. There's a lot of different things that go into this. Poverty
right.
Really right.
That's exactly right. There are other things that go into it, and that other thing that goes into it is culture. Right?
And, oh yeah, because culture is just one thing. Yeah, totally.
No, it's not just one thing, but I'm saying that is separate from the poverty thing, right? That is a huge component. So that's why I'm saying when you control for poverty, you know that that's not the fact. That's not what's separated. Because even when you control for poverty, this particular demographic, this ethnic demographic, is still committing a grossly disproportionate number of violent crimes. So then I ask myself, okay, so process of elimination. So process of elimination, right? Okay, hold on.
So here's the problem. You're starting off with a premise that this stuff is not in any, that these statistics are not in any way changed as a result of the way in which people investigate crimes. Because we're talking about FBI conviction rates, are we not?
Well, it's not just, it's also the...
And arrests.
Yeah, it's
so if there's already some racism going on.
Okay. So what you're hold on, help me. Tell me you're not suggesting that we prosecute and convict more Black murderers than white murderers, and that's what's accounting for the gross disparity in the murder rate. Please tell me that that's not what you're suggesting.
I'm saying that that's something you can't rule out as a possible thing that would change the number. I'm not saying that would accommodate for all of the disparity. But
not even close.
Actually go, but you don't know how much it would account for. You don't know.
It is not reasonable to assume that it does, and you're assuming that it. Okay, so basically we have to throw up our arms here, and then we can't go by anything then, because I can't completely, I can't, yeah, you know, I can't, you know what else I can't disprove? By the way, what do I call you? Lundy? What do I call you?
Lundy works.
Okay. So what I mean, you know what else I can't disprove here? I can't disprove that every single Black person has been framed, right? It's been elaborate setup, an elaborate hoax or some shit. I can't categorically absolutely disprove that either. What does that mean? So what? We can't have any discussion then, because I can't categorically prove, I can't absolutely prove everything.
I'm not
a certain element of common sense is required here. You have to be reasonable.
You really just don't understand what I'm telling you. You really don't. And the problem is that I'm asking you the same questions that any expert would ask you, and you're throwing your hands up and being frustrated at the fact that you have to answer these questions because you find them to be unreasonable. Well, I'm sorry, but this is the same stuff that every statistician has to go through. They have to look at the fact that there's going to be other delineating factors that might help, that might change their statistics. Right. They have to look at different variables. They have to actually measure this stuff.
Right.
if you don't have any idea as to what other possible outlying variables might change the statistics, then you can't derive a conclusion based on the statistics.
We all agree that poverty does create a situation where people are more likely to commit crime, right? It's common sense, right? If you're poor, you're more likely to steal or whatever. You're going to be more angry, that sort of thing potentially, and that might lead to rape or murder or whatever, right? So it makes sense. But the question is, yeah. So the question is not, the question is, why is there such a big difference when we control for poverty still? Because if it was just poverty or if it was other factors, what is separating these particular groups? So when we control for poverty and we see that the African Americans are still committing a grossly disproportionate number of violent crime, then there's something more going on. So what does that leave? So then there's racism. Okay, so let's think about racism. Okay, how much of a contributing factor is racism? Now, when you add up
what the cause of the crime is,
when you add, well, I'm not talking about like petty shit like marijuana smoking.
It really does.
I mean, because I would agree. I even said it in the hangout.
Here's the thing. Racism also helps with increasing the amount of terrorists in the world too. So, or bigotry anyway.
What do you think contributes more to that, to the terrorism in the world? That quote unquote bigotry that the West has against Muslims, or
who brought
Islam?
In Muslims? I was just talking about terrorists.
Or Islam?
Who brought in Muslims? I was just talking about terrorists.
Oh, great. So now we're going to make a false equivalence between Islamic terrorism and like Christian terrorism. Do you think those are equal?
I was just saying terrorists in general. Because here's the thing. No expert actually looks at this as a Muslim thing. No one specifically looks at that way. Like no expert does. They've long abandoned that as like plausible.
Why? I mean, when we're talking about
religion has no actual like useful definition in any sort of research on this subject, so they just basically stopped trying on that front. So they don't bring in religion.
Where do you think where do you think ISIS and homophobes even? Where do you think they get these ideas from? Right? Like why are they homophobic? Is it just because what? It's because of their religious bullshit.
No,
you think?
Probably not. No.
And then that religious.
I'm actually a firm believer that if you're a douchebag as a religious person, you're going to be a douchebag when you're not religious too. I don't.
Just magically? I mean, what do you think? You're born a douchebag? I mean, how does that work?
No. I mean, if you're homophobic, chances are good you were homophobic before you used your religion to justify it.
Not everybody who is like homophobic is a terrorist or racist.
I wasn't saying that they were terrorists.
No, I know, but I'm just
You're
saying.
the one who brought them in as a comparison.
Okay, I don't know where we're going with. I don't know where you were going with this, but
you're the one who started saying.
So the whole point here is that it's astonishing to me that you don't think that Islam, a religious text, is a motivating factor when it comes to terrorism and the behavior that these savages are exhibiting. Like, it's astonishing to me that you think that it's all purely what? Socioeconomic? It's not.
I don't think it's all purely one particular thing.
Okay, well, predominantly?
I'm going with what the experts say.
What is it predominantly? Okay, what do the experts predominantly say?
There are two main hypotheses right now as far as what the cause of terrorism is. One is something that Pape brought up back like a decade ago, which was non-state actors desiring political power. And the second one is social acceptance, which is the other main thing that people tend to be following around. There is a third one that sort of integrates the notion of things being sacred and things being sacred being mollified by people who are in some sort of disenfranchised state. But that's usually used in combination with the social or political power desires, and it's usually not seen as any sort of primary motivating factor.
See, here's the thing. You keep the experts that you're appealing to are the people who already have your political leanings.
So it's a conspiracy. Right? Gotcha.
Not a conspiracy, that there are two sides of this, and that people would have two different political views, right? They're going to they already have a certain bias. They have a certain idea in mind.
Okay, yeah. So all the political scientists at this point,
not all, because not all of them agree with what you're saying. There are many political scientists who would say that religion does motivate it. What do you?
The vast majority of them are in agreement that religion is.
You always say vast majority. Show me the stats. Show me the stats that prove that. And besides, what does even majority even matter? The vast majority of people believe in God too.
Show you one of the main proponents of
the vast majority of theologians, the people, philosophers who study theology, they believe in God. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, but here's the thing. We're not talking about theology. We're talking about political science.
I'm just saying that a majority doesn't.
Now, here's the thing. If we're having a conversation as to what Christianity means to people, we should probably consult a theologian. I don't really care if they believe in a God. So when we're talking about what is true when it comes to political science, when it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to these sorts of things, I'm going to talk to the experts, or at least read what the experts on this particular subject are saying. And I'm not going to
experts.
Every single one that I found. If you can find some sort of indication that review literature.
All right, what we can do is we can have this discussion again in the future, and then I'll go ahead and bring other articles, and we could basically just joust back and forth with different papers, different researchers, and that gets us nowhere. Okay, because you can find statistics that support practically anything you want.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, honestly, just look at nutrition. Even with nutrition, it happens, right? One week you'll get some statistics that says a certain food is terrible for you. Another month you'll say, well, this food is horrible for you or good for you. You know what I mean? It happens, and this is not physics, right? Where it's very easy to quantify certain things and measure certain things. When you're talking about politics and things like that, it's very difficult to quantify these sort of things.
Actually, it's not. I'll go ahead and invite you to read a book that I was actually sent about a week ago, called, or it was 2 weeks ago. It's called Dying to Win. It's written by Robert Pape. Lots of math used to come to his conclusions.
And then there's a lot of math that indicates that that extremism in the Middle East is motivated by religion. You can easily quantify that.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah. That's what people have been doing. For over the past decade, they've been confirming more and more that Islam is not to blame for terrorism.
No, that it is.
No, it's not. That's what all the experts have been coming to the conclusion of over the past, since Pape's book.
Look, okay, this goes back, I think what you're driving at, maybe not you specifically, but other people have been driving at, is that certain volatility, right, can spark certain, I don't know, chaotic tendencies or whatever in a community or in a region of the world, right? So that's true. No one denies that. But it is more easy for that sort of chaos to take hold in certain cultures in the world than others. And religion offers, especially the way that it's written, the certain religion, like Islam especially, is a particularly powerful tool when those conditions arise, where people go ahead and rise up and do shit, right? These barbaric texts that, or texts that can be so easily interpreted in a way, in a barbaric way, they are a problem. They present a problem. So what do you say to that? So, like, would you not agree that if, I mean, let's suppose I just grant you for the sake of argument, which I think is true, I don't think it's even debatable, that when you introduce chaos into a system, you create war, whatever, yeah, there's going to be, you know, violence and, you know, tension, anger and stuff like that, and that's going to manifest in different ways. But would you not agree that it's going to be worse if you have certain, you know, religious ideologies in these places that, you know, support shit like slavery, child sex, child rape, you know, taking women as your slaves, killing apostates, killing infidels? Don't you think that it would be more pronounced there than in, say, a Buddhist, I don't know, community?
I think if you put the Buddhists in the exact same situation, they'd be just as much to be terrorists.
Really?
Yep.
You think they would rape children, behead people, take women as slaves?
You understand there are Buddhists already who do that, right?
Yeah, but would it be? Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I'll take your word for it. I'm sure that there are, but would it be in the same degree? The same number of people would do it? Would it be to the same degree? Because that's what we're talking about. Of course, there are going to be savages all over the world. There are Americans right now who are serial killers.
What reason do I have to think that it would differ?
Because when you actually listen to the terrorists and they ask you, and you ask them their motivation and what they're actually saying, they will tell you what their motivation. And I think they know their motivations better than you do. What do you find funny about that?
Yes, because we should.
I mean, it's like if you go on a killing spree and you leave a diary explaining why you're doing it, I'm gonna go, no, he didn't really do it because of that. He did it because of whatever.
Because you're seriously saying that we should just believe terrorists. Like, that's amazing to me.
I believe that we should believe when criminals say that they did it for something, yeah, that should kind of be an important consideration in determining why they did something, what motivated them. So you're saying that you know their mind better than they do.
I'm saying that experts know better than they do.
Oh, good grief. These experts that you're pointing to,
the peer-reviewed research,
are almost, I can almost guarantee you that they're like the Noam Chomsky type, right? And if you're focusing exclusively on these people with that political leaning, like regressives, then that's what you're going to get.
I'm just going off peer-reviewed research.
Yeah, and I can find you peer-reviewed research that shows that Islam is a large contributing factor as well.
Go for it. I encourage you to try.
Okay, and when I find it, what will you do?
I'll listen.
Well, yeah, but will it change your mind?
Maybe.
Maybe? That's it? Just maybe?
I have a lot of peer-reviewed literature saying one thing, but if you have peer-reviewed literature...
Or are you just going to like wait? You're like, okay, well, I have 6 papers here. You only gave me 2. Therefore, 6 outweighs 2. Therefore, I'm going to go with this. Is that what I mean, is that something you're likely to do or what? I just want to know. Because I might be wasting I don't want to waste my time here.
If you're
just going to ignore it, then why am I even going to bother looking for it?
If you have any sort of peer-reviewed research that's modern, that's not outdated, and that says a thing, I'm willing to accept it.
Okay. And then what? You won't take a position anymore? That's it? You'll just be like...
I'll definitely shift from the position I have now.
Okay. Good. Fantastic.
But I'm aware that you won't find this stuff, which is why I'm so entertained.
Okay. I don't think that you've actually looked for it, because I think you already have your own political leanings, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for you're focused on certain authors, certain people, a certain political angle that fits with your worldview, and yeah. So.
I'm just going based off of what the experts say, and you're giving me nothing. So.
The experts, as if there's like a 100% consensus or even a majority consensus.
Well, here's the thing, though. I'm actually giving you research, and you're giving me nothing in return and saying I'm wrong. So there you go. Do you see the problem here?
I will go ahead and do it. I didn't think that we were supposed to come here to this discussion with like papers in hand.
I didn't think I was supposed to support
I will go ahead and do it. And I mean, once again, this is a, some of these issues that we've been discussing are very difficult issues, right? They're very difficult to quantify, to study even, So it wouldn't surprise me if none of the literature that's out there currently is conclusive one way or the other, right? That's
okay. Here's what I'm gonna say. Vic, because this is such a sticking point. Because I'm bringing up studies, you're not bringing up studies, and you don't think this should be a problem because you can so totally
right now. I can't just magically produce a paper.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just informing you that because this is such a sticking point, because you weren't aware that you were expected to provide studies to back up your positions on and anything along those lines, that I've caught you off guard here, and that you weren't expecting any of that. Go ahead. We're going to take a week. We're going to take a week off from this particular discussion. Okay. And next Saturday, you and I will line up our research on racial. What topics do you want to specifically cover then, so that we don't end up going off into a billion different tangents?
We can do profiling. We can do the Muslim. I think the Muslim one is good because
Okay.
if you don't think that religion is a strong motive.
Yeah, I don't think it is. And so,
No,
yeah.
no, no, no. Okay, wait. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. You're not suggesting that I'm saying that religion is the sole
No,
cause
no.
of
I'm
extremism.
saying
I'm just saying
that,
it is a major factor.
yeah, I understand your position. I'm saying
Okay.
the research does not bear that out.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and yeah, by next week I will try to provide you with some literature that
Do we
shows that.
want
And I hope it won't be a total waste of my time,
do we want
right?
a cutoff
Because
date?
what I anticipate is going to happen is this. I'm going to provide you with some articles, right? You're going to say, "Okay, great. All right. Well, I still believe mine. Since it's kind of up in the air since we have these competing ideas now. I have my ideas, you have your ideas, and it's
Sure.
basically
Sure.
washed."
Let's go ahead.
So,
Let's go ahead and set up some parameters here. So first off, we should probably have a cutoff date for what counts as literature on whatever subject we're talking about. Secondly, I still would like a more discrete list as to what we're supposed to be going over, so that we don't go all over the place. So let's start with number one, making a list of what specific topics we want to talk about in a week's time. Number one, religion and how it uh, works in relation to terrorism. That sound fair enough?
sure.
Okay. Number two, the efficacy of profiling. Number three.
Um, the effects of culture, I suppose. I don't know, on society,
Sure, on
on
society
crime, on
in regards to crime.
which is going to be difficult to I don't anticipate there's going to be very much literature on that because it's just something so difficult to quantify. But that doesn't mean that the factor is not there, right? Just because there isn't a study out there or that it's difficult to study, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? That doesn't mean that it's not happening.
We'll see.
Just that it's difficult, right? It's difficult to measure, difficult to study.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah. Well, why don't I go ahead and just go through your. Yeah, because rather than me responding to your comments, I'd rather just address all the points that you raised here, so I don't have to post any comments.
Well, I mean, we've already been.
We went through most of it, but there were a few points that you raised. There was one here
Oh,
I
the
think
comment
bears
section.
clarifying.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
So there was one point here. I'm trying to find it now. Oh, yeah. You were being obnoxiously condescending here, but you were like,
Really expect me to be nice to somebody who's advocating for something that I find to be detrimental to society.
surely you don't think that my intention here is to
I don't think
be.
you're intentionally trying to undermine progress in society, but I think you are. And why
Okay,
would I
well,
be?
see, I think that's exactly how I feel about you and people on your side of the aisle. I
That's
th-
perfect.
I I think regressives, that whole mindset, right, it is ultimately um,
We should
it's
probably go over
ultimately
that as
based
well.
on
Actually, we probably won't find anything on that.
it's ultimately based on political correctness of some sort, right? I know you won't admit it. Nobody admits that they're being politically correct. You'll never find any, but that doesn't mean that
Well, I
people who
mean,
are
it depends
politically.
on how you define political correctness. I mean, as far as I'm aware, political correctness just means treating people with respect and wanting to.
That is not all that it means.
Okay.
A lot of it has to do with a hypersensitivity towards, um, you know, not offending people, which things that wouldn't ordinarily be considered offensive if you were actually being objective and level-headed.
Okay.
So, for example, if I were an African
Wow.
American,
Wow.
if I were an African
Wow.
American, I would not feel
Wow.
insulted by
Yeah, you can't
someone.
do that. You can't do that.
Do what?
You can't say if I was X, I wouldn't be offended by Y, because you don't know that. It's the same thing as saying, like, 100 years ago, I would have so totally been against.
Okay, well, we know that there are people who are
Don't
African
know.
American who talk just like I do and agree with me completely, right? We know that they exist.
Really, that doesn't matter.
So, okay, anyway, moving on. So your comment here was about you were taking issue with my I think you were talking about a part in the Hangout where I was referring to Black people who should take personal responsibility, and
that was a fun one. That was fun.
And yeah, and so okay,
Just
so when I use, so it seemed to me like you were just nitpicking the word personal responsibility.
When you were basically going off on your own because Bureau had to go somewhere.
Right. I understand. I know what you. I think I knew what you were addressing.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and explain to everybody here basically what this is referring to. So basically, Vic was going over his position that had been gone over so far because he felt that he was represented by Piero, because Piero was trying to, in Vic's words, accuse Vic of being a person who would just go up and harass a random Hasidic Jew on the street because a bunch of Hasidic Jews have been stealing cars lately. And Vic was like, I would so totally not do that. That's not what I would do. What my particular perspective is, if there's a bunch of people who are loitering around a car, that would be suspicious to me. And until they would escalate the situation in some way, I might not question them. If the problem existed and a Hasidic Jew was there, I might go up and question them. But you know what? If I was a Hasidic Jew and I knew that that was a problem in my community, then I wouldn't feel offended by that. And I would actually think it completely understandable and totally reasonable that somebody's coming up and questioning me. And I would instead of diverting that vitriol to the people who are questioning me, to the police officers who are just doing their job, I would direct that vitriol to my community, and I would say to all the other Hasidic Jews in the community, I'd say, hey, what's going on here? We need to be better. And my question is, why is it so bad to ask everybody to just take some personal responsibility in their own communities and cultures? What is so wrong with that? What is so wrong with that?
No, actually,
have I done it correctly?
Hold on. Oh, there's echo all of a sudden.
Probably. My mic sometimes echoes when I'm in a hangout and I have it open.
Oh. Testing. Okay. Well, let me just give you props, man. I mean, this is like twice now that, unlike a lot of people, you really do seem to listen. You really do listen, and you really do understand what people are saying. You don't like straw man them. At least not when you're recounting what they actually said. It is very accurate. So that was a perfect representation of exactly what I said. So props for that. But what you did do, however, is you kind of nitpicked on the term personal responsibility, because I believe that personal responsibility is not just about your own, for example, a mother, right? Yeah, she might be a good, upstanding citizen, doesn't commit any crime or whatever, but if she doesn't care about what her children are doing, the personal responsibility she should feel shouldn't just be about her own behavior, but also the behavior of her kids. And then I'm saying that should be expanded not just to your kid, but to your own family, your community, even your own country. So for example, I gave this example in the Hangout with Piero. So when people criticize Americans for their role, their huge role in the global warming problem and the CO2 emissions, right? I, for example, might drive an all-electric car, might be a Greenpeace activist, I might have voted for Ralph Nader, blah, 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 right? I might vote against any, vote for any sort of policy that reduces CO2 emissions, right? So I personally am not contributing to the problem, but I wouldn't get offended because people from Europe or whatever are saying, Americans, you guys need to get your shit together, right? Because I understand what they mean. They're not referring to me. They're just saying that we, as Americans, as a group, are one of the biggest contributors to the global warming problem happening in the world, which is affecting other people. So I don't take offense to them. I don't lash out at them. What I do is I say, you know what? I acknowledge it. I say, you're right. And that's why I vote. And then I basically criticize anyone in my group who then isn't doing anything to help the problem, right? So I don't think that I'm being as personally responsible as I can be if I'm not actually doing my part, even if it just means talking about it, right? If I'm not doing my part to do that, to fix the problem, then I'm not being as personally responsible. Now, if you don't like the word personally responsible because it's, it kind of implies that it's just you, right? Then fine, then
Or
use
that you
another
have
word.
responsibility, or that you yourself have
Yeah, you
responsibility
use another
over
term then. I don't care. But the gist, you
people
understand the gist of what I'm trying to say. So that's why I'm saying, so when I broadly refer to African Americans in general or Muslims in general, it's not that I'm blaming all Muslims or I'm blaming all African Americans. What I'm saying is that they are the people that are in the best position to cleanse the radical or whatever elements in their communities than people outside of their group. So for instance, who's going to fix the radical extremism at the end of the day in Muslim countries? Is it going to be Christians? Is it going to be Jews, atheists? No, it's going to be Muslims.
No, it's not going to. Muslims are going to have nothing to do with it. One of the main things one of the main people who are going to have the ability to do something about it is whoever the government is. Which for some of them are Muslim theocratic governments, but not for all of them.
Okay, but they can rise up, they can vote, and some of them are democratic in a sense, and there are elections, like in the United States, right? We can vote, right? And it's not even just about that; it's also just about talking about it, because Pirro he always tries to make this ridiculous caricature of my position, saying that, oh, we need to teach children not to rape. We're going to create classes in school and to teach not to rape. That's not what I'm suggesting. When we change the culture of homophobia, I know you don't think that we did, but I'm saying, or that we didn't eliminate, but
No,
when
we
we
changed.
drastically reduced,
Hold on, because
I know you said that we
I
changed
said
it
that we have
just.
changed the culture of homophobia. That's actually my entire point.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
I know. What I meant was that you don't think that we've actually eliminated homophobia to any drastic degree. You just think it's been transformed into a more subtle way, or exported it somehow. So
yeah?
when that, well, okay, so we disagree there, but I'm just giving you my opinion. So my opinion is that we did drastically reduce the culture of homophobia in this country, and it didn't happen by taking seminars on why you shouldn't be homophobic or teaching people not to be homophobic. There was no, we didn't, hold on, we didn't add classes to school, but
Wait. How can you say that? Because that happened a lot.
actual classes in schools that
Well,
teach
not
not to be
designated
homophobic.
classes, but awareness campaigns were all over
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
United
yeah. That's what I'm saying. Okay, that's fine. That's what I'm saying. But Pirro was suggesting that he specifically said is, yeah, we can create a class in schools to teach children not to rape and stuff, which is a caricature of what I'm proposing.
I don't think.
Hold on, let me finish my point here.
I don't
So
think. Well, hold on, because the problem is I don't think that it's helpful at all to create like a singular class that people have to take for a year on one particular political
I
issue.
agree. I
Because they're
agree.
only going to get maybe a month's worth of stuff that
No,
might.
it's ridiculous. No, it's ridiculous. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that. This is the way Pirro is describing my position, which is completely wrong. So that's not what we did to curb and to reduce the culture of homophobia in this country in the 90s so that now it's drastically reduced. What we did is we just talked about it openly. I was through word of mouth, just people talking about it with their colleagues, people at work, with their friends and stuff. And on TV, influential people like celebrities started talking about it. There were, of course, there were actual movements like the LGBT movement, things like that. All of that contributed, right? And we all embraced that. We allowed it to happen, and that's what changed it. But we're not allowed to do the same thing, which is what, hold on, but you guys aren't allowing us, like people on your side of the aisle aren't allowing us to do the same type of thing to reform African American culture, because anytime anyone mentions the problems within African American
Well,
culture,
okay.
we're seen as bigots and racists.
God, it's because that's an entirely different approach. Like I don't understand how you don't see the difference between shining a light on people that you have no reason to hate and showing them to be actual human beings on a national scale, and then encouraging people to be more accepting of this group of people based off of this, and saying, why can't we do the same thing with black people, even though what you're saying is that we need to criticize black people and black communities.
Criticize the black people who are contributing to the problem.
But here's the thing, why does that have to be relevant?
Because it's black people who are going to be in a position. Look, you said there's a difference here, and I don't think there is a substantive difference. Because at the end of the day, well, let me explain why I don't think there's a substantive difference. At the end of the day, it has to do with value.
No. At the end of the day,
Attitude.
there is a huge difference between those two. Because one is the campaign centered around getting people to accept people that they have rejected for unjustifiable reasons. The other one is increasing a critical edge to an examination of a group of people, many of which have done nothing wrong, to say that they are doing something wrong and that they are responsible for making sure that the people who are being bad don't do anything bad anymore, and that this is somehow their responsibility.
It is not necessarily but it's not necessarily.
The first one increases acceptance of a group of people. The second one increases bigotry towards a group of people. Those are two way different things.
Well, sometimes the bigotry is just understood. When you notice a pattern, right, you're going to form certain preconceptions, and there's nothing unreasonable about that. It's like if you notice a pattern that a lot of people in this particular community tend to be acting a certain way or tend to exhibit certain behavior, it's like, especially cops, when they notice that most of the crime is being committed by young black men.
The groups themselves aren't even comparable, because you can say that all homosexuals by definition are people who are attracted to the same gender, but you can't say that about black people on anything at all. The most you can say is that all black people have a darker skin tone. And that's not even true, because there's albinos.
Okay, well first of all, okay, well, let me just clear that up. When I refer to black, right, when we talk about, it's just right. That's all it means. It doesn't mean.
I'm not going to go crazy over you using the term black. It doesn't.
Okay, good. Because a lot of people do. They think I'm a race realist because I'm looking at solely at skin color.
Here's the thing. I think I've demonstrated that I can, as a matter of fact, comprehend the words that you're saying. Good. So what I'm telling you is that there's a massive difference between shining a light on a group of people who fit one thing, which is that they're all attracted to the same gender, which, by the by, that's actually
them. I said to shine a spotlight on the people who have the attitudes that are bigoted against them.
No, but well, hold on. By the by, shining the light on just homosexuals, I think, and this is something that I can't back up at the moment, but as a person who is experiencing this, I think it has increased an invisibility of those who are not heteronormative, but also not homosexuals, like bisexuals. Like, there is a cultural phenomena among not only straight people, heterosexuals, but also among homosexuals, that we don't exist. And the fact that the light has been shined on homosexuals is a great thing for them, as far as trying to find a way to get them more accepted in society. But if you just shine the light on them, what about the other people who are not them but are still experiencing either an invalidity of them as a people? So these are problems that could have been avoided if it was better strategized from the onset. But that's all not even going to be relevant to the notion of what you're proposing that we do when it comes to black culture, because there is no thing that unifies black culture. Nothing at all. I know of nothing that you can say all black people are of.
Once there's that thing again, all, okay, it is, again, it's implicitly understood that I'm talking about the
but that's the reason. That's the reason. You already agree then.
I'll be more specific. If you want me to be more specific, I'll tell you exactly what I'm referring to.
Because if you agree with that, then you already agree with what I'm telling you. The reason they can't be comparable is because you can, as a matter of fact, say that all people who are homosexuals are attracted to the same gender. You cannot say any equivalent thing of all black people.
I am not saying all black people.
Or even a black culture.
Let me explain the specific cultural attitudes that I'm referring to, right? That I think are very prevalent in certain parts of the black. It's very pervasive in the black community, enough that it's well, I'll just give you the example. So I'm talking about like the culture of defiance and hostility, the hypermasculinity, the reverence for guns, the culture of not taking responsibility for personal behavior and other personal failures, the culture of glorifying thug rappers while denouncing, articulate, educated blacks as Uncle Tom, sellouts, and coons. The culture of having children out of wedlock, which prolongs poverty and turns young black people towards gangs. Hold on, I can go on. The culture of negligent and irresponsible parenting.
Here's the problem. You are seeing that all of these particular things that are predominant in what you call to be black culture are problems, right? You find
I don't know about predominant, but it's pervasive enough that it's contributing.
Okay.
It's a huge
problem. These are things that are found somewhere within black culture that you find to be problems, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what are the reasons that these things exist?
Well, I think it can be traced back to slavery and, institutionalized segregation and stuff and that sort of thing. But so what? That doesn't exist anymore. So at this point, we need to eradicate this somehow. At some point, we got to say enough is enough. We need to remove this.
If the reason that those things exist doesn't exist, then that's not the reason those exist.
That's the reason. That's what initially, historically, led to the situation that we're currently in. But at this point, we need to solve it, right? I mean, like, what do you do? This problem currently exists, so we have to deal with it.
Here's the thing. You're extremely oversimplifying what a culture is in that instance, because you find all these things to be problems and you think that they're all tied to massive events that have happened in the past, when, as a matter of fact, those massive events that have happened in the past, while they may have had an effect on the current standing of whatever you're talking about, because again, black culture, as far as I'm concerned, is a very nebulous and very different, very
yes, it is. It's a fuzzy term, absolutely.
And as a result, I don't know how to address that as a term because it doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense.
But since you're going to delineate particular things that you're saying that you see in this culture, I'm going to look at these things and I'm going to look at each one of them. I'm going to just say, is this a problem? Why is it a problem? What can we do to fix it? And the question of some of them, like children born out of wedlock, I don't think is a problem. And I don't.
How is that not a problem? Okay, look, when you have children out of wedlock and and usually these are poor mothers, right? So you have a single.
I don't know that.
In a lot of cases, all right, these are single mothers, and a lot of times they're working all day. Their kids have no supervision. There's no, no father figure in the family. And what do you think he's going to do to find love and a family? Basically, might join a gang, right? And that leads to criminal behavior in many cases.
I don't know that though. These are all just like,
it's not a things that we're talking about just probability here. We're not talking about it's a guarantee.
You can't talk about probability until you have numbers to back it up.
Let me ask you this, Lundy. We know that there are people within these communities who end up being good kids, right? They grow up to be like well, Obama's a bad example because I don't think he was born in a traditional African American community. But
whatever that means, I don't know what that means.
One that is predominant. All right, for whatever you can, it's like this is the thing. You guys bury your head in the sand, like you don't even know what I'm talking about. Like you don't know what a white culture is versus a black culture.
No, I don't know what a white culture is either. I don't know what a white culture is.
Or whatever. You don't know what the difference. All right, never mind. So anyway, the point is that let's be more specific. Let's take a ghetto. All right, in the ghetto. Do you know what a ghetto is at least, or do I? Okay, you understand what a ghetto is. Good.
I understand what a ghetto is. Sure,
awesome.
We can delineate that as far as
in a ghetto, right? We know that there are certain kids in the ghetto, black kids, who end up being well educated, smart. They get into good schools, right? They become these little nerdy gamers sometimes, right? Don't get involved in criminal behavior, any of that sort of thing, right? Now, what do you think is different about that? What allowed that kid to not, follow the pattern that many other people in that community follow? I would say that it's the values that that kid was raised with.
You can't know that.
What do you think? Well, what's left? What is it? What's left? What, genetics?
A million possible things.
What?
A life is something that happens with so many things happening.
Okay, so what? Okay, give me some theories. Genetics?
No, not even genetics. There's so many things that happen to a person in their lives that to say that that I'm going to postulate that this one thing that makes sense.
Not one thing. Parenting is the values are.
You're talking about the values that are instilled by the parenting. That's one aspect of that kid's
and their friends.
Life.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's one aspect of that kid's life. Of how many?
That's huge, though. That is huge.
Of how many aspects?
I'm just saying that is probably the most influential, because at the end of the day, values are what determine behavior.
And here's the thing. I'm not entirely convinced that values at their very core and fundamental level among humanity as a whole differ all that much.
They can. They do. What are you talking about? You're going to tell me that the values of an ISIS person is not different than your values or my values? They're very different.
I'm saying that at the core fundamental level, I don't think that their values differ. I think that they may have a different focus on different values that they have. Like, I'm pretty sure most ISIS fighters, for instance, want to continue living and enjoying the fruits of whatever they're able to gather in whatever.
Right, but what they find enjoyment in has to do with their values, right?
But here's what I'm saying. The fundamental values are still there. How they express themselves may change from culture to culture.
Right.
But that's something that is very difficult to actually pin down as to what they express themselves as.
Well, okay, well, let's be more specific.
What values specifically? My question to you then is, what values specifically do you think are being instilled in the child who is born out of wedlock, who doesn't go and commit crimes or whatever?
I just went through a whole bunch of them. I told you there's this defiance, this hostility, this hypermasculinity that is so, revered in that community.
That does not.
That does not. Oh, wait, that does not what?
That does not go out and commit any sort of crime.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that would be a culture, values for personal responsibility, respect for others, dignity, valuing education, valuing.
The first three that you mentioned are values that you can find in any gang culture. So what are you talking about?
Obviously, I'm not talking about personal responsibility to, your gang. I mean, to commit crime. I'm talking about personal responsibility to help the community, to not inflict, to not harm others, to
hold on.
To take responsibility for personal failures. A certain form of ethics. We're talking about ethics here, essentially.
Yes, I understand that you're talking about ethics, but you yourself probably don't believe that you should have an ethic that it's never okay to hurt anybody.
Okay, we have to apply some basic common sense here, obviously.
No. Here's the thing.
And that's part of your value system, right?
Here's the problem, Vic. I've actually gone to school for ethics.
Good.
So I know what I'm talking about. And here's the problem. You're trying to oversimplify how this works. And I'm not okay with you doing that.
I think you're trying to overcomplicate it, and you're trying to obfuscate it. And when you obfuscate it, you basically you're muddying the conversation. We can't make.
No, I'm not muddying the conversation.
Progress.
I'm actually trying to help you out.
Awesome.
Trying to help you better figure out what it is that you're trying to say. Because what you're saying right now, to any person who has a familiarity with this subject, is just a bunch of words and not actual
words. Yeah, I think you're not giving people enough credit. Okay, I think any reasonable person listening to me right now understands exactly what I'm trying to say.
They may be taking a message away from what you're saying, but it might not be what you actually want them to take away from it. Because somebody can listen to you talk about the do's and don'ts when it comes to profiling, but they might come away with that conversation and that discussion and go, oh, Vic said, yeah, it's cool to racially profile. And the fact that you might not express yourself correctly will allow them to come away with that particular thing.
Okay, great. Then I have to improve the way I communicate, maybe. So what? Yeah. What's the relevance?
Well, the relevance is when you're trying to communicate with me, I need you to actually figure out what you're saying. So
okay, see, the thing is, when I'm talking with you, because I clearly you're a very intelligent person, right? But you seem to.
by the way, I disagree with that entirely. I don't believe I am.
Okay, well, you seem to come across as an intelligent person, to me anyway. And so this is why I know that you can understand what I'm trying to say, but I feel like your ideology, your worldview, just causes you to put like this, like put like you know, your hands over your eyes and your fingers in your ears. You kind of bury your head in the sand, and you just out of an idealism. You have this idealism.
No. I need to reassure you. I have this same conversation about people needing to be more specific with their terminology when they're trying to communicate with me with every single one of my friends. You can ask them. I frustrate them on a regular basis because I keep saying, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by this? What is your metric when you're trying to talk about this? Because they don't, because I might not get the right, because the purpose of me doing that is not to frustrate you. The purpose of me doing that is not to make you annoyed with me. It will do that. I understand that. But the purpose behind it that I have primarily is to actually understand what you're saying. That's my purpose.
Good.
I'm not trying to say, don't further continue because I don't want to hear it or anything like that. I'm actually trying to.
Yeah, and well, this is why, I mean, the thing, that's the thing, because it's why it's so frustrating for people on my side of the aisle, because when we come across people who seem reasonably intelligent, like you, right, and we know that you are capable of understanding the words that are coming out of our mouth, you try to like pretend like you don't understand. Now, I know you're going to say that you generally don't understand,
No,
but I have trouble believing that.
It's not even that. In different contexts, words mean different things, and in different contexts I'm willing to let some stuff slide because it might not be as important. But you and I are currently talking about a major difference in our perspectives on the world as a whole.
Huge.
And we're doing it in front of an audience, and we're doing it with me really trying to understand what you're saying, because I already have people saying that I'm not a good listener in the chat. I'm really trying here. So
that actually hasn't been my experience with you so far. I mean, you've been able to articulate a lot of the things that I've said very accurately. So that's very good. That's kind of rare, actually. So props for that. But it doesn't seem like we're making any headway, though, which is unfortunate. Let's go back to where your confusion is with what I'm saying right here and right now. So I said, do you have children?
No.
Okay. Well, if you did have a child. If you did have a child, I would assume that you understand what I mean, that you're going to teach that kid personal responsibility, how to respect other people, not harm other people, values education. I assume that's not confusing to you, right? Like you understand what I mean.
I'll teach them the basics. I'll teach them the basics. But as you grow up, things get more complicated than the basics. Like, okay, what I'm trying to instill into you is that you yourself you understand that that sometimes killing people is necessary, right? You understand.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that would be in the cases of like self-defense, national self-defense if somebody is attacking your country.
Yeah, not to rob someone.
Something,
or just because somebody
has a gun up to your face and they're trying to rob you and you have to defend yourself.
Or
honestly, in those instances, I would say don't try to attack them, because that might end up in your death.
Or someone looked at you the wrong way. You don't fucking kill them for it, right? You don't get or
things like that. Yes, things get complicated because
that's not complicated. It shouldn't be complicated.
No, it is, because here's the problem. Depending on your perspective, us doing whatever it is that we do, self-defense even, can be seen as wrong depending on the values of the person who's observing it. So you have to really figure out what values the person has and how they properly express them.
Yeah. So I'm saying that as a parent, I'm saying that parents should feel more responsible in they should be more proactive in instilling values in their children so that they don't find themselves in these situations, that they try to avoid these situations rather than seeking them out. And I think a lot of times, Lundy, it's not really the values that you it's the values that you instill. It's the values that you're not instilling, right? So it's not so much that they're, I mean, because in a lot of cases, yeah, they're instilling values like that are harmful, detrimental. For instance, like this hypermasculinity, this defiance of, and this hatred of cops and shit, and hatred of white people. That is a value that is often instilled. But sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes they're just negligent. They're not instilling the values that would curb that sort of.
Let's refocus here. Let's refocus for a second, because this all stemmed from me picking apart something that you said and taking out a particular quote and sort of making fun of it. Right? That's how this particular part of the discussion.
Yeah, you were nitpicking.
Yeah, because I felt that what you were saying was absurd, and I was using something that you said.
Now that you understand what I actually meant, do you still think it's absurd?
Yes.
Okay, explain.
And the reason why I think it's absurd is because there's no such thing as a monolithic culture. There is no such thing as a culture that exists in a vacuum.
No, well, we were specifically talking about personal responsibility.
There is no way to address one particular culture and say that these things are found in this culture when they can be found in a variety of other cultures. There's no way.
Not to the same degree. That's the
but they exist, right? They exist, right?
Of course they exist in other cultures.
These are characteristics of that culture if they exist in other cultures. Because
characteristics of many, but they are more prevalent in this particular culture.
A characteristic that defines a thing as a thing won't be a thing in other things. A book is going to be a book. You're not going to find a pill tablet thingy mabobber and say that has the characteristics of a book. But if you define things sloppily, wherein like a chair is blah blah blah, and then somebody can bring in a rock and you can sit on the rock and it becomes a chair. When you define things sloppily, you have a problem with trying to communicate the message that you want to communicate. So when you are saying, I want to address the Black culture, and what I mean when I say the Black culture is blah, and instead of saying blah, you say examples of things that you've seen within it, which doesn't actually address what is Black culture. Examples are not.
God. This is the nitpicking that I'm talking. You're
No.
Willful ignorance. I see it as willful ignorance. Like, I honestly don't think that you're confused as to what I'm trying to say.
I know you see it that way, and it's not because it's not that I am willfully confused about what you're trying to say, because I really, really don't. And the thing is, I don't think you do either. I think you have an image in your head of what you're saying, and you think that this is something that should be easily understood between two different people.
Yes.
But the problem is, everyone has a perspective.
Easily understood among many people. You're like you're the minority, I would say.
No. I'm sorry, but your particular view on the world is actually, I think, in the minority.
I don't think so.
I think it is, because here's the thing: everybody experiences a perspective of a phenomenon differently. So when you try to define a phenomenon merely by what your perspective of it is, and other people have a different perspective of it, then that's clearly not going to work as a reasonable definition.
Reasonable definition. Why do we need to focus on like this accurate definition? I mean,
because
I'm giving you the gist of what I'm referring to. The gist isn't sufficient for you?
No.
Why not?
I don't know even what the gist is. All I got so far when I'm trying to think of...
I'm saying that certain attitudes and values that are counterproductive, that are not conducive to a peaceful and prosperous society, those values and attitudes are more prevalent in certain cultures than others. Right? Okay. And in this case, it happens to be more prevalent in Black culture than other ethnic demographics in this country. What
do you mean when you say Black culture? Because you've already said you don't mean Black people when you say Black culture. You've already clarified that's not what you mean by that. So I don't.
African Americans.
I don't.
Among African Americans. Do you know what an African American is?
I know an African American is.
Okay, now in that community of people, that group of people of Africa.
Not within that community of people. They're all over the United States.
Yeah, okay.
So you can't just say within that community of people. There's a bajillion communities.
Okay, so take all of them together, okay?
And just put them into one spot and say that community.
Yes.
That's
hold on. So you take them all together, right? And then across all of them, right, there are certain when you add up the total number of these counterproductive values and attitudes, right? It is more prevalent in this group of people than it is in other groups of people in the United States.
My God.
That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying, and the reason it's important to focus on, hold on, calm down. And the reason, hold on, let me just explain. Let me explain why I'm referring to all of them in general and not just this.
No, you're not understanding what I'm telling you.
The people at the end of the day who are going to eradicate this decadent element within their community, it's not going to be whites. It's not going to be the Latinos. It's not going to be the Asians. It's going to be blacks because they're already suspicious. And a lot of them are very suspicious of white people. They tend to listen more to people within their own community. You have to find influential people within their communities to spread this. It has to be through word of mouth in that community.
You don't believe that, and I'll tell you why you don't believe that, because you've already debunked that idea already. And that idea that you have put forward that debunks that notion that they listen to prominent members in their community is that you have defined part of this culture as disrespecting people who are in a level of authority in their community, or people who are educated in their authority in their community, or anybody who has any sort of influence over them. You have defined this as part of the culture that you're talking about. So if that is a part of the culture, then you can't use somebody who is in authority in that culture that people will listen to say that they will listen to them, because you've already defined it in such a way that they won't.
You can actually have an influence on that attitude if more of them speak out against it, instead of, for example, focusing so much on the quote-unquote problem of racism with white cops against.
But we know that that's a huge problem.
It is a problem. I don't think it is it's not, certainly not the main problem.
How do you know?
I mean, you're saying that they're committing more murders against other blacks because of racism from cops?
I think that plays a huge part in it. I think that the fact that there is racism in America plays a huge part in pushing.
That's why they're killing each other?
Yes, I think it plays a huge part in pushing people to the edge. And one of my sources actually goes over it.
What is your evidence of that?
I'll go ahead and tell you, because one of my sources that I gave you goes over this in particular. Let's see. That's the Profiles in
Probably
Injustice.
Written by another regressive.
David A. Harris. I don't know him, but you can look him up and tell me if he's a regressive or not. I don't care. But here's the thing. He goes over this in his book, wherein that the fact that these things happen, the fact that this institutional racism happened, the fact that people have to experience this, it forces parents to instill a particular value in their children, which is, this is something you're just going to have to deal with. Keep your head down and just grit your teeth and bear it. Mm-hmm. That is a predominant value. Not only is that a predominant value, but that actually sometimes drives naming your child, because sometimes, and my boyfriend is an example of this, they will name their children a Caucasian sounding name so that they'll be more accepted when they're not being viewed, like on a job application or something along those lines. That's a thing that people use the fact that this racism exists as a motivating factor to instill particular values to counteract that racism as being an effect on their lives. And that's what drives people to be the way they are. Is if you already agree that the values that you're instilled with is what causes you to be who you are, at least to some degree. Yeah. So when I'm telling you that racism colors the values that people give their children, and you're saying that's not a problem, you are in disagreement with yourself.
I'm not seeing the link between this institutionalized racism,
well, I'm gonna go ahead
and people going out and committing murder against other black people.
Go ahead and read the book.
And rape and that sort of thing. It just doesn't make any sense. There's I don't see anything that reasonably leads one to the other.
It's under Chapter 5, the costs of racial profiling.
Well, get me that. What's the gist of it? Tell it to me. I want to hear it.
I already told you the gist of it, and you said I don't see how that's true.
You haven't explained how that's causally related. I mean, if I were suddenly being discriminated against in some way, how is that going to suddenly, oh, you know what, I'm going to go shoot some person, or I'm going to go and rape some woman?
A short time ago, Sykes was named to a delegation of Toledo civic and business leaders who would visit Cleveland for an economic development conference. And the invitation, this is just the paragraph that this is in. Invitation of Cleveland's mayor, Michael White. Toledo chartered 2 large buses to take its group to the meeting. Because Sykes preferred to travel by car, he drove himself. He attended the meeting in Cleveland all day, and when the event began to wind down in the late afternoon, he decided to leave a few minutes early to begin his drive. Oh, sorry, it's skipped to 97. Sorry, this is the paragraph it's on. In the same way that psychiatry has begun to widen the definition and conception of PTSD to recognize the reaction to smaller scale events like the abuse of spouses or children, Sanchez and Hucles argue that psychiatry needs to recognize the devastating impact of racism on the lives and health of African Americans, Latinos, and other minority citizens. For years, she says, Blacks have been taught by their parents that in order to get along in the majority culture, they must swallow everyday slights and insults, ignore and internalize them. Quote-unquote microaggressions, like racial profiling, concludes Sanchez and Hucles, give people of color, quote, one more reason to be fearful and concerned about their safety and well-being, unquote. Likewise, Vivian Martin, a newspaper columnist, says that hypervigilance of Blacks who face racism every day is necessary, even as it creates the kind of chronic stress that leads to all sorts of chronic illnesses that afflict Blacks more than whites. Racial profiling, she says, is about a lot more than traffic stops. It's about a way of life. Okay.
Nothing that you just said explains how you go from, yeah, okay, it can cause post-traumatic stress disorder in certain people. It can affect their psychology to a certain extent. But how do you go from that to, oh, now they're going to become murder each other like crazy? They're going to rape people like crazy. And the slights that you mentioned, the slights, I mean, a lot of these people, this is happening within the Black community.
Okay.
What slights are they receiving on a day-to-day basis? They're surrounded by other Black people.
So one of the things that you have delineated as being a problem in what you call to be Black culture that might cause somebody to commit racism is hypermasculinity, right? So isn't hypermasculinity usually characterized as grit and bear it and ignore and internalize your feelings and don't let it out?
I suppose that's part of it, yeah.
And that was one of the things that they said is a direct result of racism in America. As far as
that's not the only thing, though. It's more like a machismo type thing. It's more of a machismo type thing. So like hypermasculinity is not just about repressing feelings, not crying.
So you don't think that the rest of hypermasculinity might evolve from that notion?
No.
No, you don't think
no, I know, because I don't think everyone is subjected to this. Certain people are subjected to this racism and stuff, this discrimination, maybe, perhaps, right? I don't know what percentage of it. I don't think it's all of them. What do you think? All of them are criminals? All of them are? No. I mean, it's a very few number of them that are subjected to this, what they would perceive as, discrimination, on that level. Like, and it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, like, okay, so you get pulled over by cop. Hold on. So a cop pulls you aside and he scrutinizes you more than somebody else, and because of that, you're just going to go and start murdering people and raping people. That's going to make you hypermasculine.
Oh, goodness gracious!
That makes you hypermasculine.
I'm sorry, but you just do not get it, and I don't know how.
I don't see the link.
So I'm just going to go ahead and say that I have sources saying that, agreeing with this notion, you're saying you don't think it makes
sense. It's a non sequitur. You have presented a non sequitur.
That's fine for you to think that, but you haven't demonstrated that it actually is a non sequitur. So I'm going to have to, we've been going on for about 2 hours here, and I really have been wanting to do this thing where we were going to go over what we're going to go over in the next week and what all we should bring sources on and the metrics for those sources and the like.
I mean, it's just amazing to me. This is what's amazing to me, Lundy, is that I asked you originally, what do you think the cause is? And you say you don't know. You admit that you don't know, right? And then when I reject certain things that you're presenting here as a possibility, you get annoyed. You get upset, as if you've already made up your mind that this is.
Vic, I'm not actually proposing that these things are the cause. What I'm doing is I'm using the words that you give me, the things that you say are the causes. And I'm saying, well, according to this, racism causes those things to happen. And your response is, I don't think that makes any sense. And it's not my fault that you don't think it makes sense that I am able to explain to you how racism can cause what you find to be a problem.
Is the racism so rampant that it causes the hypermasculinity in this to exist to such a degree
It's a
with
major
so
contributing
many
factor,
people?
yes. It's a major contributing
What
factor.
is your basis for that? That's what I want to know. How do you know that it's so that the discrimination that they face from cops is leading so many of these people to become hypermasculine? You don't think it's more likely that they're hypermasculine because that's the culture? That's how they're raised? That's what they see from their friends, from their
Cultures
peers,
don't
from their
form in a vacuum.
parents? You don't think that's the most influential
Vick,
factor here?
Vick, where do the parents get their values?
From their parents and their peers and their
Here's the
environment.
question. Here's the question. So if that's the case, then we would expect values to remain constant throughout generations. We do not. So that's
not true at all, because of course there are other things that influence the culture.
Yes, there are other things that give us our value.
Right. Yes, you know, the other things that can influence the culture. And you know what can influence the culture? Hold on. You know what can influence the culture? Us talking about it openly and not having people like you constantly paint people like me who bring it up as bigots and racists.
And being correct about what we're saying. That's what I value.
The thing is, anytime somebody brings this up, like you haven't even said, you've admitted essentially that you don't know what's going on. So you can't discount what I'm saying categorically. But yet that's essentially what you're doing, because when I talk about it, you throw in all these roadblocks and stuff. You know, and maybe not you specifically, but people on your side of the aisle paint me as a bigot and a racist and stuff. And what does that do? It stifles this sort of conversation. People are like, "Fuck this! I don't want to. I'm not even going to discuss that because I don't want to deal with that. Who wants to deal with that baggage?"
I'm just going to be clear here. I do think that you are somewhat bigoted. I'm willing to still have a conversation with you regardless of that fact. And I'm not going to be able to convince you that you are what I think you are because you don't think you are. So that's not something that I find to be a reasonable avenue to go through. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm not even kind of addressing that. I'm just addressing what I find to be at least things that can be spoken about to some degree.
Well, see, that's the thing. This is a problem, though, because if you think that I'm bigoted, then other people who maybe aren't as reasonable as you and wouldn't be willing to have a conversation, they will just shut down completely. The moment they think that you're a bigot, they're not going to listen to what you have to say. But that's a problem. That's the mentality that I'm trying to fight against.
No. Because if they aren't interested in having a conversation with you, then that's just their right. That's not a problem.
No, but it's not that they want to have a conversation with me. It's that they don't even listen to what I'm saying because they've already made up their mind. They have this knee-jerk reaction that when anybody brings up anything about Black people in a negative sense, they are automatically bigoted and racist. Like there is no legitimate criticism of Black culture, apparently. It's all external. It's all institutional. It's all white people or some shit. Poverty, whatever. I mean, it's insane.
No, Vick,
it's insane. I mean, how can people not recognize that cultural values are one of the most influential things in a person's life?
Vick, I'm just going to quote you in your hangout with Piro. My principle is that statistics matter.
Correct.
That's what I'm using to base my positions on. I'm terribly sorry. Well, you haven't shown any.
I explained it to you. I used process of elimination. No. When I control for poverty, and I see that there's still a gross disparity in crime rate, obviously not poverty then. It's something else that's accounting for it.
Not a single statistician would accept your process of elimination as a valid paper. You'd be failed. But anyway, I really do want to get past this because I want to set up for next week where we're actually
go for it.
Have stuff. So, number one of things we're going to discuss, religion and how it works in relation to terrorism. Number two, the efficacy of profiling. Number three, the effects of culture on society in regards to crime. which is going to be the weirdest one to try and research. But what do you want a fourth one?
That seems good.
Do you think those three are fine?
I think so.
Okay, so we're only going to talk about those three then.
We don't have to make it so strict, but I mean, we could just keep this as a bit of a free for all. But
we're going to do our best to just talk about those three. And if it goes on for too long, I'm relying on the chat.
You know what I'm interested in, and you know what I'm interested from you is I'd like for you to tell me. I mean, you've already kind of said it, and I'm very curious to see if it's actually going to have an impact. Because you said that if I present to you certain studies that support what I'm trying to say, that will have an impact on how you think about all this.
Yes.
Okay. I have your word on that.
That you have my word. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. If you have modern day studies that are peer reviewed that demonstrate that religion is an actual is a predominant cause of terrorism in people, then I will start to accept that is at least a plausible thing. I will
dominant
probably
cause.
however you want to phrase it. It's something
okay. A major factor.
A major factor, sure.
Okay.
It's something we clearly disagree on. And I want to warn you ahead of time because you might get confused by some of the stuff that you read. Some of the research that I have read references Islam. They are not talking about in any way the doctrines of Islam or anything that has to do with people's religiosity. When they reference that kind of stuff, what they've been doing lately is just using that as a way to get a community of people together. It's supposed to be used in conjunction with the social acceptance hypothesis, not religion.
So let me just ask you this question since we're on this topic, just really quick, because it's just baffling to me that you don't think that religion is okay. So when the Saudi regime, when they institute, this Wahhabi fucking interpretation of, Sharia law, right? You don't think that has a huge impact on the barbarity that goes on in that culture, in that society?
Talking about when you say barbarity, I don't know what you're meaning.
So, for example, just recently, a person who was an atheist, right, who was discovered to be an atheist, was sentenced to 2,000 lashes and 10 years in prison.
Yeah.
Now, you're telling me that has nothing to do with religion? With Islam?
What I'm going to tell you is that it could be any religion, and the same thing would still happen because of the history of the people and because of what they have gone through, and because
the culture
that they're in. But the religion is not a primary motivating factor, because here's the thing: those same sort of strange laws that we find to be barbaric and ridiculous can be found in a lot of different religions that exist in the world, which makes it kind of interesting that most of the most of the countries in the world that have those religions, that do have those laws in those holy books, do not actually use them.
Yeah, you know why that has happened, and it's exactly what Majid Nawaz, people like Majid Nawaz, what they're trying to do is they're trying to reform Islam so that people don't interpret it in this way. So that's what's happened with Christianity. So Christianity, Christianity
says himself that you shouldn't allow ISIS or any terrorist to say what is the right interpretation of the Quran.
Right.
They are saying, what he is saying is that you need to accept, you need to increase the amount of moderates, and you can increase the amount of moderates by making the religion itself open to interpretation. Now, I don't know if that works or not. That's his position. But I will say this. Ooh, goodness gracious. I don't think that if it was a different religion that they had, that things would change.
See, I think it would, because not every religion is as easy to interpret in such a barbaric way. So, for instance, like Jainism, right? You're going to be really hard pressed to justify the types of atrocities that ISIS commits under a Jainist religion, right?
It's very easy.
very easy, as easy, really. I mean, this is,
Oh,
look,
totally.
if you, when you Google just through, just search through the references to jihad or infidel in the Quran and the Hadiths,
That's what I was
um,
doing in my research.
you're
So
going to see what it says about what should happen to infidels,
yeah,
right?
it's
And that's where they get it from. And not every religion is as
okay.
easy to.
Problem. The Quran is not without a bajillion contradictions, so it doesn't really matter what you find in there. People will interpret whatever they want. My belief, and this is something that I believe is being currently agreed upon by people who are in the sort of analyzing of these situations, is that who you are and what values you have is who you are and what values you have independent of whatever religion you have. You'll simply use whatever religion you do or do not believe in to then justify what you already believe to be true.
No, because what happens is
Let
you're
me
trying to
explain.
separate the religion from the values. And what I'm saying
No,
is
no,
if
no, no.
religion is
I'm not
a
trying.
value.
I'm not trying to. I already think it happens.
No, no, religion is valued.
No, no, no. Because here's the thing: who it was convinced of the truth of a religion through reasoned argument and debate.
No one.
Exactly. So why is it, do you think, that they learned this stuff in a book and went, huh, that must be right?
Because that's what they were instilled with when they
No,
were being raised.
no,
And
no,
that's what their culture has instilled in them.
no. Because why? Okay,
Okay, how did it happen then? How did they come to become obsessed with religion, with Islam?
there's a wide variety of reasons that have gone on throughout the whole Middle Eastern.
Okay, give me what you think is the main reason. If it's not culture and it's not parenting, what is it?
Uh, desire for political power.
Desire for political power?
Yes.
So you're saying most of the people in the Middle East are aspiring politicians?
I think that the reason why the beliefs that the Middle East has are as prevalent and pervasive as they are is a result of their predecessors aspiring to have political power and using this particular book or set of books anyway.
Oh, so it's a method of control, is what you're saying. So you're saying that's the reason they adopt it.
I think the fault in an increase in religiosity when it comes to
The problem,
when it comes to actual state actors, is a result of trying to use the religion to control people. But if you don't have the religion, you can still control people.
yes.
You already have examples of that.
Yeah, that would be fine if this phenomenon was mostly limited to politicians and government. But we see that this is like in households, like just husbands all across all of them. They treat their women as property essentially.
But it
Right?
is.
This isn't a political thing.
It is, because the people.
It's a cultural thing.
I don't know how you don't see this, because you have this instance.
I just love how you become so exasperated, as if this is so obvious and this is so set in stone already. When you just acknowledged before that you don't even know the.
No. It's not that I think. It's not that I think that what I'm telling you is obvious, because I don't. Otherwise, a lot more people would believe it, probably. Anyway, what I'm saying is you're not getting what I'm telling you.
I think I do get what you're telling me. I just don't agree
So
with it.
what I'm telling you is no different than a Democrat's beliefs would still be a Democrat's beliefs if there was no Democratic Party.
Yeah, but I'm not suggesting that it's coming from a party. I'm suggesting that it's coming from a culture.
I'm not either. I'm saying that it's probably coming from a variety of different things that have happened, not only throughout the history of the area, but also in a variety of the different cultures that exist in the area, intermingling in whatever way that they do, in very complicated ways that you can't just distill down to, well, what's their book say? It doesn't work like that. If it was that easy, this stuff would have been figured out years ago, but it's not. Political scientists are still arguing over what the right interpretation as to what's going on is. This isn't something you can just easily attribute to common sense and intuition. This isn't something that you can say, well, if I put myself in that situation.
It's not just common sense and intuition, it's observation. You can see how children are raised in these societies.
I'm sorry,
they are raised to.
This is just your intuition going.
Have their lives revolve around religion.
Just your intuition going.
It's not intuition; it's a fact.
Okay. We've been going on for over 2 hours. Let's see.
See, that's the thing. I don't know how to make headway with people like you because you just deny what's so patently obvious.
Obvious to my mind, and even though I haven't done any actual research on this, yes.
Oh my god. Okay. All right. Well, I think we should just
this is why we're doing this in the first place, because I'm actually asking you to do research. Okay.
Research on something that is patently obvious, right? I need to somehow prove to you statistically that children in the Middle East are being raised to, value religious ideology and Islam, and that I need to somehow demonstrate that to you somehow. You can't just accept that as common knowledge. And that's debatable somehow. That is a point in contention
here. And I know that it seems so obvious.
Controversial.
I know that it seems so obvious to you that you're right. I know it does, and that's kind of the problem.
Do you think that's controversial, though? Do you think that's actually controversial? That the reason that people in the Middle East are highly Islamic and that they're among way people, because of their parents and their culture?
I don't think it's controversial among people who have done no research into the subject. I don't think it is at all.
Okay, so you have done research into this, and you have come away with the idea
that religion
become Muslims has nothing to do with the way they were raised or their culture. Has something else is causing them to become Muslims and highly.
No, not that something else is causing them to be Muslims. Obviously, if Islam is the predominant thing in your area, you're gonna probably be a Muslim.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's incorrect. What I'm talking about is in relation to extremism.
What's the difference? If you're raised, so wait, let me get this straight. So you acknowledge that, of course. I mean, of course. If you're around people that are predominantly Muslim, then you're going to be Muslim probably. But somehow that doesn't apply when you're surrounded by extremists?
Because you're not normally surrounded by extremists. These people do not just all they don't start growing up around each other and being like,
there are elements of control.
That's not how this works.
Islamism and conservative Islam, right, is that's part of it. That's where it starts, essentially.
Okay. Well, there's no research saying that that's the case, and there's a lot of research saying
so the conservative Islam. So it's a very small leap to go from a person who is like, who isn't blowing themselves up, right, necessarily, who isn't a jihadi and strapping a bomb to themselves, but still believes that we should chop the hands off of thieves, and then we should give atheists 2,000 lashes and sentence them to 10 years in prison, then we should still kill apostates or imprison them, right? Those are conservative, sometimes they're even called moderate views. Just because you're not a jihadi doesn't mean that you don't have a pretty fucking radical perspective to outside observers, right? And it's very easy to go from that mentality to a jihadi. Very easy.
Okay,
I don't know.
That's not how it works, but okay, I'm going to go ahead and keep moving on. So those are the 3 topics we're going to cover. Do you want to set a cutoff date on what peer-reviewed research we're allowed to use? Like it can't be before 2010 or something.
So it has to be peer-reviewed, because I mean I don't
it does.
I don't have access to.
You can go to your public library.
I'm not going to my public library for some idiotic, for some silly discussion over on YouTube. Please.
Well, I'm just going to tell you
I just don't care enough about. I'm sorry. I'm not no disrespect to you, but this is not that. I discussed this because it's interesting. Hold on. Let me just explain something to you really quick.
Because that's just silly. If you don't care about this enough to do research at your library about it, why would you argue about it for over a month with the same person? That's not.
Because it's enjoyable.
You're just lazy.
It's fun.
That's the problem. So either peer-reviewed research or scholarly books. These are what I'm saying. And you can find delineation for what counts as a scholarly book anywhere on the internet.
Okay, let's imagine that there are only 2 studies that have been done on this. Do you think that's enough of a sample? So that's enough to form a conclusion over?
Well, that's not even close to the amount of studies that have been done on it. So there you go.
Well, we'll see. I will try to find it.
Okay. So if you're willing to do that, because if you're not willing to go out and do the research that I'm asking you to do, then fine, we won't do this again.
Okay.
Okay. So are you willing to do that?
I'm not going to the library. No, not for this. But I will search on Google for it. Yes, I will.
You'll search on Google. Okay.
Yes.
You'll go. So
did you go to the local library to find the research that you've uncovered?
No, luckily enough, I have other people who have access to scholarly articles, and they just send them to me.
Well, fantastic. So what the hell?
Well, I'm terribly sorry that I'm in a more privileged position than you are. I have privilege, and
let me. I've said this before, and maybe you didn't listen to that particular hangout, but let me just explain to you that the point of these discussions for me, the thing that I'm most concerned about in these discussions is really not so much about Islamic terrorism or the problems in the African American community. My big beef here is with the regressive left. That's what I'm criticizing. That's why I don't care whether we discuss, you know, even feminists too, whether we're discussing African Americans or Muslims or sexism, or the Gamergate and all that stuff. I don't care. It's all the same shit to me. Because when the beef that I have with the people with like you, who are, in my opinion, are impeding progress. That's why you're known as regressives to us.
That's why some people call us regressive.
It's counterproductive because you're preventing the type of discussion and dialogue that is necessary to reform culture. You deny that culture is a factor or a big factor, and that's a problem.
That is your opinion. Okay.
Yes.
I just want to be clear here that regressive isn't a term that anyone agrees is something that couldn't even possibly be a thing that is real, as far as being applied in the way that it is these days. Even if you look it up on just Wikipedia, there's like a bunch of different people saying, well, this is why it's a valid term and this is why it's not a valid term. So I just look at the term regressive in the same way that I see the term asshole, honestly.
No, that's not what it means. It's just basically people who basically, because of political correctness, they don't want to look at certain issues within certain groups because of a certain level of guilt, a certain level of trying, virtue signaling.
There's no difference in the application of regressive and SJW or cuckold. It's all the same people.
All right. Anyway, let's leave it there and we'll reconvene.
So anyway, do you want to have a cutoff date on the relevance of research? Do you think that there's a level in which we would say that's outdated?
I don't know. What do you think?
I'd probably go with a decade. Anything past
I don't even know if that's necessarily relevant because unless it's outdated because the research has been refuted, right? But if it's just another paper that happened to come at a later time that has a different opinion, that doesn't necessarily mean that the old paper's been refuted. It just means that there's a new opinion now out there, right? I think politics is something that's very difficult. Well, we can look for it. We'll look for it.
So here's kind of what I'm saying. You would clearly agree that a paper from 1935 arguing in favor of lynching would probably be bad.
Right.
Okay. So what I'm asking you, because outdated is normally we don't accept anything past it.
I think I know what's happening here. I think what's happening here is that you know the dates of the papers that you're citing. So you want to basically say, okay, it has to come on that date or later. Otherwise, it doesn't count.
No, because you can probably find some research from like the late 80s that might agree with you. But the question is, has that been refuted thus far? Have you even checked?
Have you checked? That's the thing, because I don't think that you actually checking any of this.
Some of my sources are
cherry picking sources.
Some of my sources are from like 2 years ago.
Things that support my point of view.
I have checked. checked, I've asked around, I've asked people, I'm like, what are the critiques on this? What are the critiques on this? For instance, Dying to Win is a book that I cited to you. There are critiques on the mathematics that are done in Dying to Win in the peer-reviewed literature.
Okay, well,
I actually have.
See, that's another thing. I'm not going to buy books.
Well, you don't have to buy a book. You don't have to buy a book.
I mean, maybe I could probably get you an Amazon link. I could read the synopsis.
Hold on, because Dying to Win is something that you can probably find on in the peer review literature, because it's basically a book form of something that was already in the peer review. But regardless, I know that there are critiques on the mathematics that are done in Dying to Win, for instance. I've seen them, and I know to the extent in which those critiques work, which are basically that the research that has been gathered thus far in that book, as of a decade ago anyway, are relevant insofar as general terrorism, but irrelevant as far as suicide terrorism are concerned, because there's not enough data that, or the data is actually in an incorrect way. So I am aware of critiques of the things that I'm getting. I would ask of you to make sure that there's no critiques of what you're doing. And the way in which we can more make sure that this probably isn't a problem is if we set a cutoff date. Now, I would normally go with a decade. I think that's fair enough. It goes back to 2006. And that's not too terribly far.
We'll just put our stuff on the table, and if you think it's too old, then fine, you can dismiss it. And look, I can already predict what's going to happen here. I'm going to find a couple of sources. It's not going to affect you one way or the other, right? You're still going to be peddling the same ideas, the same. It's just it's going to be a total waste of my time, but I will do it. I will do it. I will engage in this, but I can already tell you it's going to be a waste of time.
So my problem here, as far as
maybe you're different, because I've dealt with this in the past. I've been debating on YouTube for years.
I don't think you've dealt with the notion of somebody who appreciates peer-reviewed research presenting them said research and then going, no.
Good. I hope you're an exception. I hope that it will actually sway you in some way if I find this information for you. But I'm just saying that I'm skeptical. I don't have. I'm not
saying that,
keeping my hopes up.
All I'm saying is that I don't understand, because you're college educated, right?
Cornell University, I believe.
Yeah, you're college educated, and you don't understand the notion of outdated research.
I do understand that, but I also know that just because it's old doesn't mean that newer research has superseded it in some way. Doesn't mean that it's refuting it. I mean, because we have seen.
I understand that as well, but it's a lot easier, and we don't have to sit here going through.
To me, what's more important is that when we go through the paper and we see, like, for example, there's a lot of papers what I've reviewed it after I've looked through it, and the sample size is so fucking small that it's like, you got to be kidding me, right? They're trying to form this conclusion based on like that little information. That's ridiculous, right?
Okay, so basically what I'm saying to you is that I don't want to sit here and have to read line for line all of our research together like it's a So instead, I would prefer that we simply get the research, read the research, present what it says accurately, and then I'm going to go ahead and post all of it as far as what we're able to find in the comment section, or not in the comment section, the description, or copy paste onto like notepads that I can make available online, and stuff like that. And so but the problem is, if we have like 20-year-old research, we're gonna have to go through line for line, because I'm gonna sit here going, well, that seems kind of outdated because this says this and that's saying the opposite, and that's like 30 years ago. Where did that get that information from? So I just want to prevent that from happening. So what I'm saying, 10 years. So anything from 2006 onward is fair game.
I will try to keep it within 10 years. All right.
I think that's fairly nice of me. I could make it like 5 years, and that would be extremely difficult.
Yeah, but basically anything more recent than what you currently have, essentially. That's what you ideally you want.
I have sources from 2001 that agree with me, dude. Like,
okay, all right. Let's not make a big deal out of this, all right? Well, we're just gonna lay our evidence out there, and then we'll see. Okay.
All I did was say, let's set a cutoff date, and you're like, this is
fine.
You brought this up and made a big deal out of it.
You're making it seem like this is like some huge thing. I mean, is it really that important to change my mind here? I mean, holy shit. I don't care if you change your mind or not. I'm just here to have a discussion with you. I'm trying to explain to you why I feel the way I do. I learned why you think the way you do.
Here's what happened. I just suggested a cutoff date, and then you immediately blew that out of proportion.
Fine. 2006.
Huh?
2006. Fine.
Fine. Just stop making a big deal out of it. Good Lord.
I'm not. You're the one making a big deal out of it.
You're the one that brought it up as a problem.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
You're the one who mentioned the whole thing about the age of the paper.
You started it. I said, hey, do you want to have a cutoff date? And then you said, I know what's going on here. You have some sort of ulterior strategy because you know that there's other reasons.
Oh, whatever. Fine. Move on. Move on. Move on. Okay, we've agreed. 2006.
So 2006, peer-reviewed research cutoff date. Do you want to include scholarly books? Or because you don't want to buy books?
Do we really need to go through this? I mean, does this really need to be this formal?
I don't want Saturday to come along and one of us misunderstood what the hell's going on, and then a problem occurs. Like, I don't want to read a book and then you go, I didn't know we were allowed books. Because you've already started.
You're going to do books. So this is just going to be basically us comparing books and articles, and it's like, here's my list of, here's my basket of books and articles and magazines and blog posts, and here's my basket of, and we're just going to compare the basket heavier.
It's going to be, here's the peer-reviewed evidence and what it says. And if any one of us uses a blog post or just a Wikipedia entry or something that is generally seen as
did it occur to you that perhaps when the data is so obvious, right, there might not need to be a study to corroborate what we can already plainly see from it. So, for example, let's take the if you go to the hold on, if you go to the global, listen to me.
No, dude, it's the dumbest thing you've ever said. I really think it's the dumbest thing you've ever said. The sun looks like it goes around the Earth. We don't need any research on that.
I'm about to explain what I'm going to say. Okay.
No. You can't justify that. I'm sorry.
Just the entire process. Jesus, calm down.
No, because I actually have some respect for scientific endeavors, and
so do I.
That was the most ridiculous thing you have ever said. Some things are just so obvious we don't need to investigate it scientifically. Dumbest thing you've ever said.
All right, let me explain.
No.
So, for fuck's sake.
I'm sorry, but that's really...
Can you just let me finish what I'm going to say? So when there's a when you go to the global terrorism database and you see that when you look at the top 10 countries with the most terrorist attacks, right, and the most deaths and stuff, and you see that Muslims are responsible for most of the attacks in 8 out of the 10 countries, right? Do I need a peer-reviewed paper to explain to me, to basically prove that Muslims are more responsible for the acts of violent terrorism around the world than, say, Christians, whatever? Do I need a does that need to exist? I don't think it's necessary to exist because the data is already there. It's patently obvious.
So once it's already been investigated and the data has been given, then it's not necessary to investigate anymore.
So like FBI.gov, right? When we look at the crime statistics, right? I don't need a peer-reviewed paper that shows that blacks commit more violent crime than other ethnic demographics, right?
Okay, so here's the thing.
I don't need that. Am I right? Am I right? That counts as source.
Because here's what you need to understand is that you cannot derive any conclusions when you look at a statistic other than what the statistic actively says. Once you start saying, what else can I get from this? You're wrong.
Okay, so when we look at those statistics and we see that poor black people commit more violent crime than not just all poor white people, but all white people put together, right? Then from that alone, without a study, without anything to some author confirming it, from that data alone is sufficient for me to say, okay, poverty is not what's explaining the disparity here.
You can discern from that information is that more poor black people are in prison for violent crime than poor white people. That's the most you can figure out.
You see what I'm saying? This is why this is useless, because now you're gonna say, now I need some sort of paper to prove to you that racism is not what's causing this disparity.
No, you don't need a paper proving a negative. You need a paper. That's not how hypotheses work.
I mean, what else would it be, right? Wait, Lundy, explain to me, what else would it be? If it's not poverty, what other possibilities are? Let's see, there's racist possibilities, racism. There's everything's a fucking hoax, so it's or culture or genetic. I'm not a race realist here, so I don't think it's genetic.
Do you not understand what you just did?
What did I just do?
What else is it if it's not X? Think about it for a second.
Yeah.
It leaves fewer
options, right?
Do you know what that is?
No, explain it to me.
It's an argument from ignorance.
No, it's not. I don't
know of any other alternatives, so let's go.
I didn't say that I don't. I'm specifically saying the opposite. I'm saying that I do know what it's most likely to be, because it's not this, right?
You don't know what
so a lot of people claim. A lot of people claim that it has to do with poverty. That's the prevailing. That's the prevailing narrative, right? On many people on your side of the aisle,
I'm sorry.
Right?
You can't say that.
So when we exclude that as a possibility, that leaves what? Racism, culture.
You can't say that you know what it is without any data to back it up. I'm sorry.
Well, I can limit it, right? I can exclude that from one of the possibilities, correct? And then we can assess which one is of the remaining options, which is more likely.
No, you can't. Ask any statistics professor ever. You can't.
When you eliminate a possibility, you understand that there's not an infinite number of likely. Wait, do you think there are an infinite number of likely possibilities here? Do you think it's infinite?
That there's more than what you think there are.
Okay, how many factors do you think could contribute to this? Like predominantly, like as a group, as a general, like, I mean, let's list them. Let's list them. There's poverty. There's poverty. There's culture.
Pretend that I do.
Poverty, culture, racism.
I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend like I do.
Probably less than 5.
You don't know that. Stop pretending you do.
I'm not very optimistic about this.
Provide me the peer-reviewed research, and I'll change my mind.
And I just explained to you how, in some cases, peer-reviewed research is not even necessary because it's so obvious from the data
why that's the dumbest thing
that it's not necessary.
I've already explained to you why that's the dumbest thing you've ever said, and I've quoted Wittgenstein on that one.
But I will go ahead and try to find the data for you, and the papers for you. But I already. Oh, yeah, I'm not going to say it's not going to affect you, but that's my suspicion. It's not going to affect this one way or the other, because I've dealt with so many people like you on your side of the aisle who ask for evidence, and then when you provide the evidence, they just ignore it. It has no impact whatsoever. It's a total waste of time. But I will do it. I will jump through your hoops.
It's not even a hoop. I'm asking you to provide evidence for what you're saying. And
no, it's not an unreasonable request. I completely agree.
You're endlessly complaining about it, though, saying it shouldn't even be necessary. Like
in some cases, it's just so obvious that it doesn't. But yes, I agree. It is a reasonable request from you. I will try to provide it. But I think we're intelligent enough to be able to form conclusions based on the data itself without needing a formal peer-reviewed paper to confirm what we can already plainly see from the data, from the stats.
I don't.
That's what I meant. When I said stats, I meant stats. I didn't mean papers. I meant stats.
Papers are
great. Papers are great.
Do you not think
data is equally
do you seriously think the statisticians don't do peer-reviewed work?
Of course they do, but I'm just saying that.
So basically what you're saying is, I'm not looking for peer-reviewed work. I'm just looking for numbers.
It's not just, if there are papers there, great, fantastic. I'm just saying that it's not absolutely necessary. A lot of times it's so obvious from the data that you don't need peer-reviewed paper to confirm it. It's just there.
That's an extremely anti-scientific sentiment. And I just
anti-scientific would mean that like I don't appreciate having a paper. Of course papers are good, but why can't I conduct my own evaluation? So this is the thing. This is the thing.
I like, really don't.
Let me analogize what you're saying. Is you're saying is that I can't conduct a science experiment of my own. I can't conduct a scientific study of my own by evaluating the data on my own. You require a person with a PhD or whatever who can look at the same data I can, so that he can confirm what I can plainly see with my own eyes.
Yes.
And what I can plainly observe just out there in everyday life.
Because they have more information than you do in evaluating the
data. Until that happens, right?
Then I can disregard.
Then we have to ignore it. You just can ignore the data.
You can say it as
ignore
much
the data.
But nobody has.
Let me give you an example, Lundy, and then we should probably leave on this. Okay. So in Germany.
No, hold on, because here's what I'm going to tell you. Final thing. You can say whatever you want to say, but until you actually provide reasonable amounts of evidence, such as the peer review
and data, statistics,
I don't care what your conclusion is. Nobody has an impetus to believe you or accept what you say.
Data is useless. The data doesn't count. Statistics don't matter.
Data isn't used in peer review. Gotcha. Okay.
I'm not saying that it doesn't get used, but I'm saying in the absence of it, when it doesn't exist.
If I was saying data was useless, why would I be in favor of peer review that uses
Lundy,
data?
listen to me. Calm down, man. Jesus,
No,
you're so
Vick,
excited.
You don't seem to understand.
Just listen to me. Just listen to me, Lundy. Listen to me. Just listen. Calm down.
You're being
so like in Germany right now, right? In Germany, they've had this rampant problem of crime being committed by refugees pouring into the country, immigrants, right? Recently, in the past few months. Now, I would imagine that it's way too soon for there to be peer-reviewed research, right, on the causes, etc., to corroborate the data. But the data is there. The stats are there for you to look at. And the crime statistics are appalling, right? Violent crime is appalling among these refugees. Now, what you're suggesting is that I can't form any sort of conclusion. We can't even discuss this until some sort of PhD, some political scientist goes and takes that same data and comes to the same conclusion that any reasonable person can come to just by looking at the data. That is ridiculous.
I'm going to go ahead and use an analogy that you used in the beginning of this to explain to you why you're being silly. If your car breaks down, you can determine that it's broken down by the fact that it doesn't work anymore. But you don't know why, even though it's there.
True.
You can look at it.
But I can
you can try and figure it out. But you should probably take that to an expert before you even try to fix what you think might be the problem, or you might make things worse.
Well, let's see. If I know that the problem is in the engine because I can see it.
Imagine you're a layperson who knows nothing about engines.
But that's not a proper analogy because we can just see where the problem is, right? So now, we're talking about causes.
It is a proper analogy.
When we're talking about causes, but the point is the cause is somewhat irrelevant. It might not be relevant, right? The point is that there's a problematic aspect to the car, right? And it needs to be repaired. I don't care if you just remove it, or replace it, fix it. The point is that the problem is there. Sure. Now you're saying that I can't even identify the problem. I can't even say that the refugees are a problem in Germany. You're saying I can't even say that until some sort of, political scientist comes up with a peer-reviewed article years down the road, right? After the problem has grown, who knows how much, right? We can't even discuss it until that happens. That is insane. Can you imagine if people had to sit around and wait for peer-reviewed articles, peer-reviewed papers to be published before we can actually be mobilized and be moved to action? Are you crazy? That's insane. We can't be moved to action until there's peer-reviewed literature available, peer-reviewed papers available.
You can't be moved to action until you understand what the problem is.
That is insanity. That isn't. If somebody in your neighborhood, if a group in your neighborhood is causing all sorts of havoc to you personally, to your neighbors and stuff, you're saying you can't do anything about that until some PhD comes along and does an analysis and a survey in your neighborhood to tell you what the problem is.
Everybody in the chat is basically echoing what I'm trying to tell you. Raw data is not enough.
What chat are you referring to?
The people viewing the YouTube.
Oh, I don't even know there were.
Yeah, there's like 14
chat going on.
They're trying to tell you the same thing that I'm trying to tell you. Raw data is not enough to discern the cause of the data, and if you don't know the cause, you can't approach the problem.
That may be true, but you can still identify what the problem is, that the problem exists.
That's everything
right?
that I've been trying to tell you. That is
everything. No, but here is the problem, Lundy. Here is the problem. The problem is that when people on my side of it want to identify that a problem exists, you want to say, no, you can't say that because you don't know it yet. Yes, we do. You're right. We might not know the most effective means of getting rid of the problem, but that doesn't mean we can't identify the problem.
Okay. How about this? How about this for an explanation? An expert analysis is always better than a layperson's analysis.
And sometimes all you have available is a layperson's analysis because there is no research yet available because it takes time. It takes time.
Layperson's analysis is right. You never just do that.
I mean, honestly, how many peer-reviewed papers do you think exist right now on ISIS? I mean, this is a relatively new problem. You're saying that we can't be mobilized to action against ISIS because we don't have peer-reviewed papers on it yet? That's insane.
You're arguing in favor of intellectual laziness, and I'm not cool.
This is not intellectual laziness. This is a matter of pragmatism and practicality. You simply cannot do this. Some of these things are happening at the moment. You can't wait for peer-reviewed research to come out before you can, to do it. I mean, you have to act. You have to act and at least identify the problem. Yes, maybe in certain situations, the problem is so difficult that it's difficult to know how to combat, but you have to try something, right? And at the very least, you can talk about the issue itself. But people like you are trying to say that, no, we can't even identify the problem because we can't be sure that that's the actual problem.
People like me are trying to actually figure out what the problem is so that we can actually address it accurately.
No.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing.
I'm saying that in a lot of these cases, you know what the problem is.
No, Vic, no.
Let me give you an example, Lundy.
You can't do this.
One last example, and I brought it up. Calm down. It's a very pertinent example, and I brought it up in Piro's Hangout.
They don't mean
a hornet's nest.
A
hornet's nest.
Anything at all.
Your hornet's nest
don't mean anything.
Lundy, calm down.
They don't.
Hornet's nest on
my. Don't mean anything. Stop using examples. They don't mean anything.
A hornet's nest is a problem,
I'm not
right?
listening to your example.
Figuring out the most effective way to remove a hornet's nest is a different issue, right? We can identify that there's a problem there.
Oh my goodness!
But the hornet's nest on your house is a problem. Now you might know whether hosing it down is the most effective way to do it. Maybe there's a more effective way to do it. But the point is that is a problem. We can talk about it. We can say this is a problem. Let's discuss how to deal with it. But when I point out a problem in Muslim culture or African American culture, a certain subsection,
that causes people to think ridiculous things. So here's an example, Vic. Somebody comes up and they say, "Hey, we just did a test, and it turns out that black people score less on IQ tests than white people." I'm just going to leave you with that information. Discuss its ramifications as you will. What do you think people are gonna say if they don't actually get research done on the phenomena? They might say, because they're lay people, I guess that means black people are dumber than white people.
No.
That's what they might say.
It's not. It's a very poor, I like the analogy. Thank you. Good.
Because it's a real.
So here's how I would approach it.
It's a real thing that happens. It's a real.
Let's not interrupt each other. Come on.
No, I'm sorry, because I've been trying to wrap this up.
No, you just wait. I know, but you just brought up an example. Let me address it.
No,
okay?
I've been trying to wrap this up.
So if that's the fact, right? Statistically, you're saying, hypothetically, that black people have a lower, they perform worse on IQ tests than, say, white people. Okay, that's a fact. That is a problem. Okay. Now, the analogy here is that some people would say, no, you can't say that. You can't say that. Don't talk about that. That's ridiculous, right? When it's a fact, it exists. And now we can talk about how do we fix this? What is causing this? So this is Lundy, please. I can't. You're not letting me finish here.
I'm not letting you finish because you're wrong. You're just entirely wrong.
It's just the analogy it's a good analogy. Thank you for raising it. So the point is,
no, because you're
that when I point this to.
Because here's the thing, I'm not telling you that you can't talk about facts, because I never said you couldn't. In fact, if you rewind this about like a half hour ago, I told you, you can say whatever it is you want to say.
So I know that it's not poverty.
However,
statistically, I know that it's not poverty.
However, neither you can't say that you know a thing to be the case, and nobody else has any sort of impetus to accept anything that you say as being the case without proper evidence.
Statistically, when somebody says that it's poverty, that socioeconomic conditions are driving it, that economics is driving it, I can matter-of-factly say, no, that's not what's causing it. And people like you, or people on your side of the aisle, will try to say, no, you're a bigot.
No, I'm not saying, well, I have said that I think you're a bigot, but that's not even relevant to what I'm saying now. I think that you can't say that because you don't have the evidence to say it.
Statistically, when you look at the global terrorism database.
Not statistically. You don't know what statistically means. You have looked at numbers and then presume that you know
what Bruce Schneier admits that statistically the next terrorist attack is likely to be committed by a Muslim. So what do you mean?
Question about that. Is Schneier a statistics expert at
all? So I see. The guy that you referenced, the evidence that you listed, funny how it's convenient. When it doesn't support what you're trying to say, he doesn't count. He doesn't count as an expert. But when he does support what you're trying to say, your worldview, then you offer him as evidence. Isn't that convenient? All right, let's leave it there.
Oh my God, because it was about a completely different thing. I was talking about something that he's an expert in, which is security. Like, you don't know what you're talking.
All right, Lundy, let's just leave it there.
Yeah, let's go ahead and leave it at you continuously just mischaracterizing everything that I'm saying and doing. Yes,
of course, that's what's happening here. Totally.
So, next Saturday, 3 topics to go over: religion and how it works in relation to terrorism, the efficacy of profiling, and the effects of culture on society in regards to crime. Whatever the fuck that means. We are limited to only peer-reviewed research that is at least.
That's what we know. So first you said it was peer-reviewed research and books, and I was assuming that statistics actually mattered too.
I asked you if you wanted to do books, and you said you didn't want to buy books.
No, I didn't. Well, I don't. But I'm just saying.
We're not going to do books. So we're not going to do books.
I don't know. We can do books. I don't care. I'm just saying any sort of data that supports our conclusion. That's it. That's all I'm saying. It
has to be peer reviewed or it's gone.
Well, then that's bullshit. I mean, that's
no, it's not bullshit.
You are, because like I said, you can form conclusions based on the raw data.
No, you can't. You're not an expert. You can't do that. You don't have the right. So,
fine.
Peer reviewed data only.
Argument from authority.
It's not an argument from authority. It's the experts. That's what they say. It's proper authority. It's correct. It's not a fallacy. You should probably look up what an actual fallacious argument from authority is, Vic, because you clearly don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, so next week, those 3 topics, peer-reviewed research only from 2006.
Specifically said that it doesn't count because I'm not an expert. Yes, you specifically just said that.
Because
that is an argument from authority.
No, that is pointing out that you're not an expert, and so I don't have.
That doesn't mean that I'm wrong.
No, it means that.
It doesn't mean people shouldn't listen to me, right?
No.
You just said people shouldn't listen to you because you're not an authority.
Yeah, I don't have to listen to you because you are not, in fact, an authority. Yes.
That is part of an argument from an authority. That is one example of it. Yes, it is.
No, as a matter of fact.
You should consider anyone, as long as a person has a good argument and good supporting evidence, it doesn't matter whether they're an expert or not.
That's what I'm saying that you don't seem to be getting. I'm not saying you're wrong. because you're not an expert. I'm
Yeah,
saying
you're saying that you shouldn't listen to what I'm saying.
Yes.
That's absurd.
Well,
that is an argument from authority. Because if I provide you all the information, all the evidence, right, and it's all there, and you're going to dismiss it anyway just because I'm not an official authority, that is an argument. That is an argument from
authority. You don't provide.
That is an appeal to authority.
That agrees with you. I have no reason to believe that what you say is accurate.
Which is absurd, because then you're discounting evidence that I'm providing. You're discounting the evidence that I'm providing simply because I'm not an official authority. There's
nothing absurd about that. I just have respect for science, and you clearly don't think science.
I do, but I'm saying, if look, what you should have said, what you should say, if you were actually had a respect for science, is you would say, if you provide the evidence for your particular hypothesis, right, then I will, consider that a valid argument, right? But instead what you said is like, even if you provide the evidence for your particular hypothesis, I'm going to dismiss it all. I'm not going to listen to you because Vick, you're not an authority.
Vick, there is non-peer-reviewed research out there that thinks that tries to argue in favor of the existence of the ether.
Yeah, and do they have evidence for that? Do they have good evidence for that?
They have a bunch of scientifically sounding stuff to try and justify it. But it's not peer-reviewed. It was rejected by.
You shouldn't necessarily dismiss them just because they're not authorities. If you have reason to believe that what they're saying is absurd, right?
Okay. So basically, what you're saying is, hey, if you don't have a reason to reject somebody who's saying in a scientific sounding way that the ether exists, then you should probably at least accept that what they say has some validity to it. That's stupid.
If the evidence supports it, if it's reasonable. Perhaps
we're both laymen. We don't have the ability to do that.
Unbelievable.
I'm sorry that I have.
So we can't even form philosophical opinions then, because we're not philosophers.
We can form philosophical opinions. What I have been telling you for the past hour.
We always have to appeal. We always have to appeal to authority figures.
What I have been telling you for the past hour is that you have the ability to say whatever the fuck you want to say. I have been saying that for the past hour. What I have been informing you is that if everybody here is obligated to believe things based off of reasonable evidence, then we don't have to believe anything that you say if it's not backed up with a reasonable amount of evidence. And it is not
unreasonable. The statistics are not reasonable evidence?
It's not sufficient. No.
Okay.
You need to have actual data that says what you're saying.
Yeah, right, that's what I said. But you're saying that it's not sufficient to just have the data. You need an actual expert to say, yeah, you know what, you can use that data.
It's about it. Okay, so you're saying that poverty isn't a cause of crime because of the FBI.
No, I didn't say it's not a cause of crime. It doesn't explain the disparity. It doesn't explain the disparity.
You've ruled it out. You say it doesn't explain the disparity, and that it's probably not going to, and that taking that away won't do anything, or won't do anything substantial anyway. You don't know that because
that won't account for the disparity.
What you have said is about as valid as me using the exact same statistics to say that I believe that black people are genetically predisposed to committing crime more than white people. That is about as valid from those.
There are people who believe they have evidence for that. I don't particularly think that it is.
Fine. That's perfectly fine if they believe they have evidence for that. And what we have both just said is as valid as each other concerning those statistics. Thankfully, we have peer review that actually comes to real conclusions instead of just made up bullshit.
Real conclusions. Oh boy. I'm not saying we should discount it. I'm saying that in the absence of it,
it disagrees with what you feel to be common sense.
No, of course not. Look, if the overwhelming peer-reviewed papers out there support what you're saying, and they unambiguously refute everything that I'm saying, then absolutely that is going to weigh heavily on my worldview, right? On what I think of this whole issue.
Okay, fantastic, because I have plenty to give you.
Okay.
And I cannot wait.
Fantastic.
So peer review,
but data matters too. Now, if I find that there aren't any papers out there talking about, about the fact that Muslims are responsible for most of the terrorism globally today, right? That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That just means that might mean that it's just so obvious it doesn't need to have a paper to confirm it. Like, I don't know, but I'm sure that there is a paper. I'm just saying, if it didn't, hypothetically, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not true. Because I think that's kind of what you're suggesting in a sense. You're saying that if there isn't a peer-reviewed paper about this particular thing, then we should just assume that it's not true. That doesn't follow either, right?
Well, that's not what I was saying, so I'm not going to address it. Anyway, so next week, Saturday, same time, same place, those 3 topics, 2006 and above, peer-reviewed research only, and that's what we're going to be doing. So thank you all for watching. This will be a fun next Saturday.
All right.